never published any methodology in its settlement hierarchy. Guildford has, Caldervale have. There has never been a methodology published by Horsham. And that would then lead on to rural employment issues. And we've heard, I believe it was Councillor Arthur referring to a Stiles Harold Williams report, saying that there's no demand in the rural areas of Horsham except for warehousing. Since 2007, a microbrewery has set up on the Star Road Industrial Estate and bought one of the pubs. Edge and Wax, which is probably a better ski shop than Ellis Brigham or Snow and Rock, has set up in the Huffwood Trading Estate. So, the evidence is that there is demand for space much more sophisticated than warehousing. And in any rate, it seems that the whole notion seems to be fairly backward-looking, and there doesn't seem to be any notion of the knowledge economy. And so, I think it's flawed. And there are inconsistencies. They talk about there's the landscape characteristics report, which identifies Partridge Green as being one of the least damaging places to have development in the district, and yet they've whipped my site out of the Schlar.
Is that
this year?
I didn't think sites could come out of the Schlar, but
it's been changed to not developable from being. It was done without any consultation.
Okay. The points you're making there about the village hierarchy, we did deal with that briefly on the first day.
I don't believe that. I was here as an observer. I asked to speak about it, but it was decided that there were too many people, and no one mentioned the hierarchy.
No. Well,
I was here.
We thought we did, but it was.
You asked about it, and no one was interested.
Okay. Do you want to deal with those points, Mrs. Charles, or Miss Howe? Someone, please.
I'm going to pass that to Mrs. Howe.
And what the implications might be. Does that? I'm not aware that there's any. Well, this did come up also on the first day, that the neighbourhood plans position is that the council's not actually got any mechanism for delegating assigned numbers to neighbourhood plans through any policy in the plan requiring development in villages to be commensurate with the size of the existing population or whatever, or in accordance with the hierarchy. As far as I can tell, they're just saying that they're expecting 1,500 houses to be provided, or homes to be provided through neighbourhood plans. So the position of a settlement in a settlement hierarchy doesn't necessarily mean that it's acceptable or not acceptable to have housing development there. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, I think what I would add is that there was a comment made there about the methodology as to how that was worked up. I just draw you back to CDGC 01, which sets out how the assessment of the settlements was carried out, and within that is the sort of specific considerations on Partridge Green.
But the fact that it's now a medium village wouldn't necessarily mean that housing would or wouldn't be allowed.
No, that's correct. I mean, that is
it's for the parish council.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, if you ring up Horsham, they will say, a couple of acres of 100% affordable housing.
No, that's the current core strategy policies. We've obviously reviewed those, and that the new policies which are set out in it's policies 3 and 4 change that, so that wouldn't necessarily be the case.
It could be, though, couldn't it? You've still got a rural needs policy somewhere, haven't you?
We have, sir, but the strategic policy on the development hierarchy does make reference to development proposals that are appropriate in nature and scale to maintain the characteristics and function of the settlement in accordance with the hierarchy. So there is guidance there in terms of neighbourhood planning because it's all about size and scale.
Any comments on that, Mr. Mills?
Well, it's just that I don't see Horsham changing its spots, if you like. The fact is that Horsham has its own fire station. It has more than one doctor's surgery. It has 2 industrial estates. It has
Partridge Green.
Partridge Green, yeah. It has 3 pubs. It is a fully functioning village, and it is a rural economic hub. And if it's restricted to 100% affordable housing or anything else that they choose, the settlement hierarchy will surely affect the neighbourhood plans. And then if it is limited, then you've got the chicken or egg. Does the economic base have the housing to support it, or?
Yes, I'll take your point, but you would have to. I mean, that would be something for the neighbourhood plan to address, wouldn't it? I mean, they might make a case. And I've seen them made on sustainability grounds that actually with some further development, settlement could become more sustainable and that could be beneficial. I think the point is that, I mean, it's not for me to comment. I'm not going to comment on your particular case with regard to that at the moment. I mean, the council's, I think, point is that that's how this document and the mechanism will function, and I think you'd have to sort of try and fight your corner at the neighbourhood plan stage, unless, in the light of all the other evidence I've heard, I think I say to the council, well, this isn't right, and we need to look at another mechanism for putting in some of these small sites. But that would be, I'm considering what you're saying. And I think really that, even if I were to do something like that, even though the sites might not be that big, I think that would be considered to be a major change. That would be a main modification that would have to be advertised, and the council would have to be able to comment on it and consider it if that's what I thought was the right way forward. So that's where we are. Is there anything else you wanted to say? I'll go and have it. I've been around the village. I didn't say this about sites. I mean, it applies to everyone else around the table. I've actually looked at some of the sites and the settlements, but only in brief, and I do intend to go out and look in more depth at all of the sites, the allocated sites and other settlements as well, to take on board some of these points before I come to my conclusions about it.
Yes, in a sort of the risk of being flippant, it is the mindset that I'm worried about. Horsham refers to Partridge Green's relative isolation. Google Maps says it's 6 minutes away from the nearest McDonald's.
Well, that is a bit flippant. I've just been listening to about McDonald's on Today programme, actually. But anyway, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I would say that Partridge Green isn't exactly isolated.
It's a rhetorical question. Don't answer that. Okay. Is there anything else you want to say? I mean, I've noted down some of your key bullet points there, and I think you're asking for that to be included within the plan.
Yes, I'm asking really that the settlement hierarchy be looked at with a critical eye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Sorry, I've forgotten your surname? Munro. Right, I think, well, the councils, you've got two sites, isn't it?
Yes.
Are these the Storrington sites?
Both the Storrington ones,
yeah.
Yeah.
So you've heard what the council's said, what Mrs. Charles has said, but
I'd just
your
like to
comments
make
on
the
that?
point that there's a massive gap between the size of the site at the strategic level and that likely to be supported by the neighbourhood plan groups. For instance, in Storrington, the housing survey that was done, they identified that people are unlikely to support developments greater than 25 dwellings, yet those developments might be more sustainable. So we believe that sufficient sites should be allocated in the local plan and then topped up to supplement in the neighbourhood plans.
Okay, what are just remind me, what are your projected possible numbers?
So land adjacent to Backs Close, that's 45. And we've had a positive pre-app on that as well. And the other site is land adjacent to Clay Lane, and that's for 100.
Okay. The council want to comment on those sites?
Thank you. Just to come back on that, we've had confirmation from Storrington Parish Council that one of those sites that you reference are being considered favourably within the neighbourhood plan. So you're obviously having those discussions with the Parish Council, and that's where we feel it's most appropriate that these sites come forward through the neighbourhood plan process.
I'm guessing that's the smaller site, the 45. Yeah. So just, are they considering any larger sites than kind of 50 dwellings?
The draft plan has yet to be published, but I have spoken with the Parish Council and they have said they're considering sites between that would total between 200 and 300 in total. So once those sites come forward, we'll be able to have a look at them, and also any sites that aren't coming forward, they'll obviously be assessed through the combined SA and SEA.
Yeah, we heard, I can't remember which day it was, at Henfield, wasn't it? With a site for 100, wasn't it?
The Henfield are bringing forward a total of 150 units through their neighbourhood plan.
Yeah, but one of the sites was quite large, wasn't it, I thought?
So I made reference to that yesterday, and I think they're probably erroneously, because we need to go back to Henfield because I didn't have the site numbers in front of me. I was thinking of the total number, but it was around 150. But certainly some of those sites are larger sites.
Oh, okay. Well, to take Ms. Munro's point, that there isn't actually a size limit again on neighbourhood plans coming forward with, particularly large allocations, is there?
No, there isn't.
It's for them.
Certainly for a larger settlement such as Storrington, numbers such as 100 or so would certainly fit within the settlement hierarchy. It would only be if neighbourhood planning were proposing something which would be a significant step change. So in other words, taking a settlement out of one category and putting it into another, because the development would be so substantial that we would think that would constitute be more strategic in nature. But perhaps I could just remind you that.
Well, hang on. By your definition, that's anything up to 499 dwellings, or 450, I think, with your 10% tolerance, which is quite a, potentially very large site.
Yes, and for most of those settlements, that's for the larger settlements. That potentially could be accommodated within the settlement hierarchy. I would suggest it's fairly unlikely that our very small settlements would be suggesting something so significant to require that step change. I was simply making the point that a step change, which would change from one category to another of the settlement hierarchy, would be something that the District Council would want to discuss in some detail with the neighbourhood plan.
Yes, because it wouldn't be compliant with that policy and the guidance in in the framework,
Indeed.
your framework?
We have tried to set a framework of policies for neighbourhood planning to give some sort of strategic guidance to the size and type and level of development.
What do you have any comments about
I was
this?
just going to say the policy that is within the local plan is very...
Speak into the mic,
Sorry,
please.
the policy that is within the local plan is very subjective.
And deliberately so, certain, in order to give that flexibility for local communities to be able to prepare their neighbourhood plan. The trajectory that we do have before us that was submitted in our matter statements does illustrate over 750 homes year on year, taken as an average over the first 15 years of the plan. So, in terms of the need for smaller sites in the very short term, we do have those housing completions that our trajectory shows will come forward.
Oh, well, yeah, well, that wasn't... I'm not sure you were making that point particularly. I mean, I've heard that made elsewhere, that with large sites, the trajectory is often delayed, and therefore you need some small sites to ensure one's got a 5-year housing supply in the short term. But that's not what's being said. What do you want to? Is there anything else you want to comment on? What about the? If we've talked about this, your fallback position from the council is if sites don't come forward through neighbourhood plans, then you're still going to do a sites. We heard this yesterday, a sites allocation and development policies plan in 2016. Is that?
That's right. That's when the preparation will begin, and we are going to be doing that document in any case because there are other sites that we want to look at in terms of potentially gypsy and traveller provision, potentially even employment provision, but certainly it is there so that we can identify housing sites if necessary, if they don't come through the neighbourhood planning process.
So if nothing happens on one or other or both of your sites for Storrington, would these sites be able to be put forward by developers as part of that process?
Yes, we will continue our
discussions. Will you be calling for sites or not?
Continue our discussion with developers as we do all the time and looking at sites right across the district.
Would that involve a sort of further call for sites through the SHLA process?
Yes, the SHLA is a living document and will be updated.
Do you have anything else, Ms. Munro? Right. Mr. Collins, you haven't got any small sites, have you?
No, sorry, sir. It's just a generic point. I haven't got any small sites. It's quite helpful the council's reclarified the definition of 500 or more strategic. It's a contingency point more than anything, sir, because you know our case is that there should be more strategic sites in the plan. However, obviously we don't have your determination yet or your initial thinkings on OAN, objectively assessed needs, and whether or not...
No.
So I don't want to go back into the housing debate just yet. I know today's about sites, but I'm just throwing one out there. If you were minded to think there were enough strategic sites in the plan, which clearly isn't our case, but if you were minded, then you need to then consider the implications of that in terms of what Policy 14 actually says in respect of the identification of 1,500 to neighbourhood plans. Now, the policy purports to achieve at least 13,000 homes over the period 11 to 2031, but it's quite clear at criterion D that there's effectively a ceiling on the neighbourhood plans because it says the provision of 1,500 homes. It doesn't say at least 1,500 homes, it says provision of. Therefore, if you were a clever parish council, what you might be minded to do is sit back and wait and allow the Henfield and Storrington or wherever else to produce their plans. It's interesting that Storrington might be thinking upward of 300 dwellings through their sites. lo and behold, you may well hit that 1,500 limit sooner rather than later. Now, as we know, and this will come up in today's debate, there's no neighbourhood plan proposed at this time in Billingshurst. I understand from the parish council representation that's under review, but we won't know till after the election on that point. And therefore, I question, again, the contingency built into the plan on this point, sir, because although this isn't our case, if you were minded to think the strategy was sound on a number of strategic sites already identified, then clearly we then fall into a neighbourhood plan regime in terms of our promotions. I hear what the council say about a site allocations process, but that's not due to commence until 2016. I think I was being quite fair in saying it would take 4 to 5 years to produce a plan when I said that last week. Looking at the track record of local authorities, that's about the average it takes to produce a plan. And I think connected with this argument is the MPPF position, which states, I forget the paragraph reference, but it does refer to local plan singular in terms of producing a development plan for an area, which I think is at paragraph 153 of the MPPF. So clearly Horsham are taking a slightly bespoke approach
they are.
by
But I mean,
by not doing it.
yeah, okay, they are. I accept that. But it's got to provide for the proper planning of the area. I think I don't think it's an absolute firm requirement. Clearly the government is intending or hoping that local authorities will go back to the single plan for the whole of the area, incorporating everything that has up to now been split. We're sort of going in circles, as you know, but for those of the public might not, that we seem to go round and round in circles with this. First of all, we have all-encompassing local plans, and it all gets split up into core strategies and site allocations and particular action area plans, and then it goes back to full local plans again. So currently we're back on advised to have full local plans, but it's not an absolute requirement, is it?
No, sir, I agree with that. So you can still split it up, but clearly national guidance is going the other way. I think the point is that obviously the MPPF has to be read in a whole, so you need to relate that back to paragraph 47 on housing and just be clear that the council's approach is a robust way to ensure deliverable sites over at least the first 10 years, ideally 15-year period. And what we have in the present plan, obviously, is a couple of strategic sites allocated, no more than that, and then this big gap down to sites in the order of 25, 50 dwellings, which will be through the neighbourhood plans. Just to be clear,
that's fine. I'm going to ask the council a sort of supplementary, actually, to follow up on that. You can come back again in a minute. Other people, not just Mr. Collins, have also made the point that the NPPF says, there's no limit. You've got to try and meet your objectively assessed need unless other constraints apply, which are, the really significant constraints. But that actually, the taking Mr. Collins' point about the NPPF being read as a whole, the sort of one of the key thrusts of the document is that the government is seeking a step change in housing, and that really one shouldn't constrain that. And we've had Mayfields have come along and said the same thing at the housing position. So, I mean, this criterion D, going back to his original point, just says 1,500 homes. Did you consider wording that any differently, or
Yes, so
I mean, should it not say at least 1,500 homes?
I think we spoke before, didn't we, about the it being a housing target, and we make reference in paragraph 6.5 to the housing target. Policy 14 makes specific reference to provision is made for the development of at least 13,000 homes, and certainly the provision of 1,500 homes for neighbourhood planning was not meant as a ceiling. It is a target. There isn't a cut-off date, but I'd take your point in terms of perhaps we need to clarify that, as that has come up on a couple of occasions now, whether we need to clarify that. I think we have been quite clear with the permissions that have already been given that we are taking the step change in development very seriously, and has specifically had those words in this strategic policy of at least 13,000 homes.
Yes. well, is that of any comfort? I mean, I think I'll look at this clearly. The other thing that occurs to me is there's nothing in there about the sort of fallback position that you've said is the council's position with regard to the sites plan. Have you considered putting anything else in to make that clear as well, that in terms of your monitoring of that provision?
It is included within the local development scheme, but we have actually been debating this in the office during the process of the hearing sessions, because it is a matter which we've had to refer to on a number of occasions, and we have been debating whether we could put some additional words perhaps in the explanatory text about the role of the site allocation document, and potentially also the intention to review the plan in 5 years, as we have clearly stated in our position statement. That's what we intend to do, but at the moment those words don't appear within the plan themselves. So those are two elements which we've actually been looking at.
And
we were minded.
Have you come to any conclusions?
Yes, we were minded to give you some wording, so I'm not in a position to give them to you today. We were hoping to give that to you, certainly before the last day of the hearing session, but you've given me a good opportunity of being able to give you a heads up that that's something that we're working on at the present time.
Well, at the very least, that would be useful. Those of you that weren't here yesterday, I said I wasn't really in a position to. I was asked what might happen with the report, and I said I'm just going to hear all the evidence. I would have had the option to sort of stop after the housing session to review that, but I think actually in terms of some of the evidence about sustainability of sites and how that might impact on the housing numbers, and the point being made by the council that there were constraints to test that, I've decided to push ahead with hearing all the site allocations objections and also the omission objections as well before coming to a view. Clearly, I'm not going to be held to this, but I mean, obviously, I'll be looking to I'll try and give an initial view, relatively quickly after the close of the examinations hearing sessions. As you will know, the exam remains open until my final report is submitted. So I will be certainly trying to do that within a few weeks, a month or so, to get if there's an initial view, and I think something does need main modifications, then I'll certainly try and do that fairly quickly somehow or other. But I'm not quite sure yet, to be honest, absolutely genuinely. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to say, obviously. So until I've heard all the evidence, so I can't really say any more than that. But I think something like that would, would be helpful. I would have also thought, we've got about 5. We had a discussion yesterday, for example, about this goes to effectiveness, really, doesn't it? We had about 500 homes. So Mr. Charles was asked, what does that mean? And she gave a figure of around 10% margin, which sounds reasonable to me, but I think maybe things like that could be defined, and maybe I think the point that it is a target and of at least 1,500 homes would be useful. If the 750 isn't quite the same, is it? Really, in terms of a target. I wouldn't you're not actually seeking windfall, are you? It's just what your case is, that you think that's the minimum number that's likely to come forward, but that's not sort of planned provision. And I'm not discounting what was said about the neighbourhood plan's position at the housing session, but at least that is a planned provision rather than ad hoc provision through windfall. So I wouldn't necessarily expect a sort of policy requirement for at least 50, it's not really, that wouldn't be effective, I think, but the 1,500 homes through neighbourhood plans might be a better way of phrasing it.
I think you're absolutely right to draw the distinction between the identification for neighbourhood planning and windfalls, and we're just trying to find the number for you, but there is a proposed modification to pull the 750 out into a separate criterion, just to make it absolutely clear. But the 750 is evidence-based. It's... I can give it to you now.
Yeah, no, so I don't want to go... I'm not going to go into that. You don't need to justify that again. I'm not going back on all the housing stuff. I've seen that. If you give me the mod reference number, that would be helpful.
So it's mod B 46.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. I think that is minor, but helpful. Mr. Paynton.
Thank you, sir. I'm grateful for Mrs. Charles' comments that the Council are looking at wording for a fallback and review of the local plan. I think your comments are also helpful, which I think, hearing what's been said today, there's also a need to look at whether we need more guidance in Policy 14 about neighbourhood plans and how that will come forward and how that relates to the hierarchy. Because
well, that's already before me, as I said. You know, people that came up at the housing session, as you know, about the mechanisms, how that works in the hierarchy. I'll have a consider the points being made.
And then in looking to the comment that Mrs. Charles just made, that the 1,500 is a target or not a ceiling, as it were. Can I just remind you of Mr. Boyle's points and the comments of the Council at Matter 6 last week regarding how that sits in the SEA SA as well? I don't want to rehearse that again, obviously, but there was quite an interesting viewpoints shared, I think.
Yeah, that's also before me. I'll come back to that. Okay. Is there anything else on the smaller sites? All right. We'll just carry on, I think. I might take a mid-morning break. So now we're talking about Billingshurst. Having read the... yes, I suppose... I mean, I apologise in a way about... when I initially set out the questions that I was concerned with, I mean, I was aware of a number of other sites, so I sort of quickly drafted a catch-all question, which was number 41, which was to apply to all the alternative omission sites. And these are the, effectively the strategic sites, setting out the factors that I felt obviously would need to be considered there in whether or not they should be inserted in the plan. And I think it would be useful to talk about those in relation to Billingshurst briefly in a general way with regard to both of these sites. Now, I mean, I appreciate the Council's point. The site SA043 clearly falls within the gap between the strategic sites and could be a neighbourhood planning site, but we know there's not going to be one. So, it's sort of it's not quite contiguous, is it? But it's not far away from the other east of Billingshurst site. So I think I'm happy to sort of take a broad discussion incorporating that as well for you to contribute. Does anyone want to sort of set out their stall first about the principle of development of Billingshurst, and particularly with regard to sustainability and access to services, transport patterns, social cohesion? Mr. Paynton obviously does. Yes.
Thank you, sir. I think it'd be useful if I set out where I think we're at, as it were, and it may help us to streamline the comments today as well, sir. Your question 41 is an interesting question, and just to clarify, you haven't heard from us arguing that the proposed 500 at Southwater should be removed, nor have you said that the 2,500 at North Horsham should be removed, sir. That's not our case in front of you.
No.
So to argue 41 quickly, we're not saying take either of those sites out. What we're saying, sir, as of last week, is there is a question on the rate of delivery of those sites. There's a question on the rate of supply from neighbourhood plans, and the OAN is higher than the council say it should be. So the question that we're answering in our mind, sir, if you're happy for us to answer it, is that if you find there's a need for either an increase in the OAN, or the housing requirement, due to either the OAN going up, a reduction in the forecast rate of supply from the council's identified sources, etc., we say, sir, and I think Sam will say the same as well, that Billingshurst, with its clear credentials, should be that location. It can accommodate more growth in the planned period, and it's suitable, it has a capacity, and we dispute the findings of the council's SEASA and how the council have drawn conclusions from those findings, and there's a gap in that process, so, as we say it. And so, just to go back to last Thursday and not reopen it, I think we got to a point that the SASA had assessed up to 730 dwellings in the plan period, and if you found the number was beyond 730, it would need reviewing, as it were. Secondly, that the SA concluded that the most appropriate spatial strategy was a mixture of large strategic sites with a lesser number of smaller allocations to come through the neighbourhood plan. Now, again, sir, we support that conclusion, sir. We just say there should be a need for another site at least, and that we say that Billingshurst is the appropriate site. And I don't know if Mr. Collins wishes to comment on that, but I think hopefully that's quite a useful starting point in order to frame our comments this morning, sir.
Yeah, thanks. That's helpful. I've read both your statements, and I'm not really. Might be helpful. Are there any differences between you about anything other than maybe slight points of emphasis? No, not for you, Mr. Perrins. Mr. Collins. No, you support those points?
Yeah, I support everything Mr. Payne's just said. No, we're obviously I'm here representing Crest Strategic, Ian Bowway, so we are working in collaboration. So therefore you can read our cases together, and we've worked. It's probably worth us giving you a bit of updates about the various joint work we've been doing. Appended to our statements is a document prepared by David Locke Associates, which is called Towards a Sustainable Settlement.
Yeah, I've seen it.
It's an appendix of the Saville statement. The master plan, the indicative concept master plan included in that is also included within the Bowway statement from Barton Bournemore as well. So we've worked together on indicative site capacity and initial master planning work. It's probably worth me also they've introduced themselves, but just clarifying why I'm surrounded on either side, as it were.
Sorry, can you speak into the mic a bit better?
Just to clarify why I'm surrounded on either side by other consultants. To my right is Kevin Kay of WSP, who is going to provide some evidence on highways and transport as part of this session to respond to your points there on sustainability.
Your name of the company has been taken in vain somewhat over the last couple of days. Have you got any connection with the Transport and Development Study D5, CDIN 01?
None whatsoever. I have made comments on that study as part of other submissions as well.
So that was done by someone else in the same... That was
done by a strategic modelling team. I'm here in a development planning capacity, sir.
Okay, all right. I mean, there are... I suppose I should temper my comments. I mean, it was explained why there were reasons for that, and that there were some alleged problems with some of the figures within there, and some of the alleged impacts and highway issues, because it's a strategic model, and that further work is always necessary. And I think that's one of the things I've put down here that we need to come on to. So to sort of set the position straight.
Yeah, I think we covered on Tuesday the matter of a sequence of further and further detail in terms of the assessment from the strategic level to one which is more akin to what would be considered in a transport assessment. So the work that we've done for Billingshurst here is what you might expect to be a preliminary stage of a transport assessment. So we've looked at the assessment produced for the consented Bellway scheme to North East and used that data to inform a further assessment of a wider potential allocation at Billingshurst.
Yeah. Okay, so I interrupted you there, Mr. Collins, but do you want
problem at all, sir. So that's, to be clear, that's appended to our examination statement as well. Transport and access strategy, dated October of this year by WSP. So that's the second of the two appendices. To my left is Jonathan Billingsley from the Landscape Partnership, and he's here in particular to provide some evidence in response, obviously, to landscape impact and your question there, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Bright's not here for the council, but that's for you. Okay. And your site, just the master plan, to be quite clear, so we're looking at, from your point of view, is it 700 dwellings, roughly?
There's a few elements to this, sir.
The southern boundary is the railway line, right?
Yeah, probably the best way to... Obviously, you've got SA118, so, which is helpfully shown on the council's plan of all the various emission sites. And that is the Schlar reference as well. And the Schlar has assessed 1,200 dwellings. Now, there's a slight anomaly between SA118 and what is promoted. If you got our examination statement in front of you, sir?
Yeah.
If you go to figure 4 at the back, which is of the back of Appendix 1, which is the vision document for Billingshurst, it's on page 15, the David Locke's document.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at it right now.
The field in the northeast corner of the red line, which is surrounded to the north and the east by the A272.
Yeah, potential open space-based community use.
That is controlled by Crest Strategic Projects. That is not included in SA118, but should be, because that is
that's the bit you're
land which is
referring
promoted
to.
as well. Yeah. Now, the promotion doesn't seek development on that land; it seeks strategic landscape and open space provision. But it would be included in a development proposal. SA118 also includes land south of the railway, which is promoted by Bellway. Land north of the railway is promoted by both Crest Strategic Projects and Bellway. In total, both total 1,200 dwellings. The land north of the railway totals a capacity of circa 700, as indicated by the capacity on the table on figure 4. So there's different components to this, essentially, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So I've got the two master plans here, and one, yours, has excluded the land south of the railway.
Yeah, obviously our promotion is jointly with Bellway north of the railway. Bellway are promoting land south of the railway too. Probably best if Mr. Painting speaks to this point, sir.
Yeah, no, sorry, just go through okay, I got the point about the Schlar. So, I'll use, for convenience, I'll use Bellway's master plan for the purposes of this question. So, working from the north, we've got a permitted development on appeal for 475, and that's in the sort of yellow ochre colour, or mustardy colour.
If I can help you, no, it was granted by the local authority, sir.
Oh, I thought it was on appeal.
No, sir.
Oh, right, okay.
I can confirm that we granted it ourselves. It was in the preferred strategy as a 500 unit site because it was pending consideration and then the planning committee approved for the 475 application, and the section 106 took a bit while to sign, but it's all signed up, isn't it, Mr. Painting? Yes.
Where have I got that from then? Completely wrong.
I can help you, sir. Sorry to bore the room, sir. The first application was refused against officer's recommendation, sir. That was submitted as an appeal. In the intervening period of the inquiry, we reapplied, sir, and then secured approval locally, which enabled us then to withdraw the appeal, sir.
Right, okay. So, fine. And then south of that, we've got the Crest land, yes? Yeah, no, hang on. South of that is the Crest land for how many dwellings?
The split's given on page 15 again on the figure 4 concept master plan of David Locke's work, sir. So Crestland is
701.
701 total. So Crestland is roughly half and half. Crest is about 328 dwellings. Bellway's 373, which totals 701. The Crest site in total is 26 hectares, of which just over 10 hectares is developable, taking into account landscape considerations, which Jonathan will come on to.
Yeah, but then south of the railway, there's another 500 for yours, Bellway alone.
Yes, sir, Bellway alone, sir.
So effectively, it's another 1,200. Yeah, okay.
So could I just clarify the relationship between north and south of the Borough line, sir, as I see it? So I think the way we look at it is this. The site in total, including the approved scheme, splits into 3. Northern land already has approval, sir, and that's coming forward, and reserve matters are due very shortly, sir. If you find there's a need for circa 700, or if you advise the council there's a need to find some more sites, and through the process they find there's a need for around 700 buildings, sir, the land north of the railway line, sir, could meet that need. If, however, the council or you find, sir, however the process works, that there's a need for 1,200, then both parcels of land could come forward during the plan period, sir. So we're not saying to you it's 1,200 minimum, as it were. What we're saying to you, sir, is there's a flexibility point there between, in the plan period, of 700 as a phase scheme, or 1,200 with land to the south or the railway line, sir.
Yeah, okay, we'll come on to that, I think, in terms of trajectory. Okay, Mr. Collins, had you finished off with everything you wanted to say?
I was just rounding off on the sustainability point on Billingshurst, just as an intro, and that is that you know from the council's evidence that Billingshurst is a large village stroke small town. For the purposes of today, I'm going to describe Billingshurst as a small town, sir, given the services, amenities and location on the main line railway. I think it might be worthwhile us just recapping the history of planning in Billingshurst so that you can be reassured, sir, that the District Council themselves have previously considered the settlement to be sustainable and a location for growth. The core strategy obviously refers to it as a Tier 1 settlement. The Council then, following adoption in 2007, produced a strategic site option paper for a number of strategic sites in the district. Land east of Billingshurst was option 7 within that. And at that time, that was being considered for 1,750 dwellings, sir. Now, that is all of the land east, so it would include the consented land now, the 475, plus the 1,200 to the south, which we've talked about. The council then produced a facilitating appropriate development document, the FAD, which was looking at slightly smaller sites, and that's about 150 dwellings, a sort of interim measure, followed by a draft interim statement which introduced effectively Billingshurst and Southwater as future strategic locations for growth. And the council obviously tested that through a sustainability appraisal process. Now, the figures talked about in those documents were smaller. They were about 500 dwellings for both Billingshurst and Southwater, but nonetheless it was a direction of travel locally that both locations were considered to be sustainable areas for growth.
When was this, sorry?
That was in 2011.
Okay. Yeah, I heard about some of this yesterday.
It's probably on the Southall today.
I'm just checking that it's the same reference.
And then the areas remained for consideration for growth in the February 2012 how much housing does Horsham District need document. Now, these were all precursors to the preferred options of the Horsham District Planning Framework. Since that history, if you like, we then moved forward into the draft HDPF, which is before you now, and obviously the final draft. Billingshurst was essentially dropped from the list as being a location for planned additional growth. We've had a situation whereby 475 were granted locally, but there's, I think, before you today, sir, a plan which includes no additional planned allocations within the small town. And part of our case is to question why that is, in particular given the acknowledged sustainability benefits of the town, facilities and local amenities which are outlined in our evidence. But that's a bit of an intro for that.
Okay, well, there's a question for the council there. What led to the dropping of Billingshurst? Was that in the preferred strategy? I can't remember. No, it wasn't. So.
Yes, sir, it was included in the preferred strategy. So Mr. Collins is absolutely right in terms of talking you through the chronology of events. It is mentioned, Billingshurst, and the role of Billingshurst is mentioned in the adopted course strategy, as it was with Southwater, and I read those out to you yesterday. We also, that was carried through the interim statement, as Mr. Collins rightly said. And indeed, around 500 homes was identified in the preferred strategy, which is CDLP 14, and that was published in August 2013. And it identified an area to the north-east of Billingshurst for strategic development, which subsequently came forward as a planning application and was granted permission. The council's case, therefore, is that we have permitted development at Billingshurst. It is, therefore, included in the district planning framework within our housing policy 14 because it is part of the commitments which are included in provision B, 14B of that policy. When I take you back to the council's statement on our Matter 12 statement, which is HDC 10, and at paragraph 42.5, where we list the planning permissions that have been given in Billingshurst, which includes the 475 that we have just been talking about, which was identified in the preferred strategy in the northeastern part of the village. And you'll see that totals 1,185 homes. So the council's case is that Billingshurst is included in the Horsham District Planning Framework. It is clearly providing a strategic role within that framework, which is what we would expect, as it is one of our main settlements, and we've clearly stated it is one of our more sustainable settlements, albeit it isn't in the heart of the Gatwick Diamond. It certainly has a role to play within the district. So it is included still within the proposed submission document that's before you.
Yeah, just on that, there's a mistake here, I think, on the table 2 while you're on that page. I was trying to work out, I was looking at headship rates actually in relation to the housing thing, but at on the bottom line you've got the same number of households in 1991 and 2001, and I don't think that can be right, and it's certainly the figure, the 62% increase might be right, but it isn't right on the figures there.
Apologise for that, sir. You're quite right. That isn't.
I'd quite like to know. I mean, I'd like to know what that figure is. I suspect you haven't adjusted the figure for 1991 households is wrong. all the others seem to sort of roughly match up. I mean, the point about this table is obviously presumably to show that Billingshurst's seen very substantial growth in the last 20 years.
Yes, it has, sir, and indeed Billingshurst Parish Council specifically refer to that growth in their statement to you. So I don't know if you wanted to ask them about that.
I don't mind who tells me the right answer. Do you know the answer? What the household figure was in?
I don't know the answer. We can get back to you on that.
Mr. Nicholson, you don't know it off the top of your head. I'm not expecting you to.
Sorry, sir, I'm just looking at our own statement, whether we actually included that or not. Don't think we did. We gave you a population figure of 2001.
Yeah, I think I've put that somewhere else. I think that's in with letter one. Yeah, but never mind. I'd just like to know,
2001.
At some stage, I'll just, while we're on that page. Okay. So the point about commitments, yes.
Sorry, sir, if it helps, I haven't got the figure for 2001, but the difference between the 1991 figure of about 2,200 and 3,452 equates to 1,200 odd, which is about 60 dwellings per annum over the period, so over 20 years, in terms of household growth in Billingshurst.
Yeah, no, I've got the rest of them are okay and consistent. I mean, in fact, what it shows is that there's most of the growth actually has been in the last 10 years, or the 10-year period 2001 to 11. Okay. I was going to, Mr. Perrins, I was going to sort of let the other site go first and then give you a chance later. Did you want to talk about sustainability, though, of Billingshurst from your point of view on this general discussion point?
Yes, thank you. It was really just to agree with what's been said by my colleagues on my right. Billingshurst is clearly a sustainable settlement. It's been recognised as such in all the planning documents to date. Our point of view is that lands to the south have not been properly assessed in any of the sustainability appraisals to date. We contend that there's more capacity to the south, which should be looked at in the context of the need for a higher housing number, which, as we've heard, we feel should be forthcoming. Just some points on the existing planning permissions granted. What that actually shows is that the council have granted permission for more housing than they originally envisaged, which suggests that there's actually more capacity in the town, which has not been properly looked at in assessing the spatial strategy for Billingshurst. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, we're going to come on to some of those points in a minute, I think. What's the council's point? What's your comments about sustainability and the ability of the town to take more development as the developers suggest?
The council's case is about a simulation of development, not necessarily the capacity of the environment to take more development. It's about the level of development that has been undertaken recently. You commented yourself in the last 10 years, the very, very significant growth in Billingshurst, coupled with...
I didn't, I just referred to your figures.
Thank you for that clarification, coupled with the 1,185 permissions that have already been given. There is very significant growth, certainly strategic in nature, and it is the council's belief that in order to achieve community cohesion, we need to, and a simulation of that development, that further growth at Billingshurst is not required, certainly in the 5-year period that we're talking about before reviewing this plan. We already have sufficient permissions, and I think Billingshurst is playing a very significant role in the delivery of housing in the district overall. Perhaps I could ask...
yeah, I mean, but that isn't... I can... yes, I mean, I can take... But I think you're making a point, but I'd maybe ought to ask a bit more about it. One element of sustainability, I suppose, is not having settlement growing so fast that the growth can't sustain I'll put it the other way around, the services and the other factors, even possibly the quality of the built environment or anything else, or even possibly rail services or infrastructure couldn't sustain that level of growth. Are you making any points to that effect, or are you just saying that there needs to be a bit of a wait before any more is, that we need to assimilate what's already been approved, or as another step change above what's already been approved?
I agree with the last statement. Yes, I do think that it needs time to stimulate growth, but there is a more practical element to this. An extension to the doctor's surgery is included as part of their planning permission for the 475 homes. The Wheeled School is looking at investment to be able to accommodate further pupil places. But I'd like to bring the parish council in on that point to talk about the facilities that they have and the timing in terms of assimilating new development.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to speak to you about sustainability at two levels, one locally and one across the district. Locally, it's true that a figure of something like 1,185 houses in the planned period represents something in the order of a third of the existing housing stock. And that's astonishing figure, and certainly requires a considerable adjustment to the way in which the village operates. You've heard mention of the doctor's surgery needs to be adjusted. The school is undergoing change. I'd also remind you that the Section 106 for the planning permission that's been granted includes investment, a considerable investment in the village centre too, and work on a master plan has only just begun for that. It doesn't, however, address some other infrastructure constraints that has been identified over the years, and that includes access to the employment sites, parking at the station, and an ongoing problem of flooding. In terms of sustainability over a wider scale, what we're looking at here is a contribution that's being asked of Billingshurst to meet the needs of the whole district. Billingshurst is not well placed to meet the housing needs of the whole of the district of Horsham. It is remote from the main corridors of movement, the main facilities, the main settlement centres, and certainly the main centres of employment. Growth of Billingshurst does not accord with the strategic ambitions of the district for economic growth, which is rightly focused in the Gatwick Diamond. So we would contend that certainly Billingshurst is not that the expansion of Billingshurst further at this time is neither sensible from a district sustainable point of view or in the short term from a local point of view. There may well come a time in years to come when there is a local housing need, a need to meet the housing requirements of the village and its rural hinterland. And those need to be continually monitored. And in partnership with the district council, the parish council has acknowledged that fact and has resolved that it will keep a neighbourhood plan under review. It will look at it again in 6 months' time in the light of the outcome of this examination. It would look at it in terms of the district council's response to that and how it might move forward for a site allocations plan. And, of course, the emerging, yet to be completed studies of housing need that will be undoubtedly drawn up over the next few years. So the parish council is not saying we've reached the limit and the capacity of the village for further development. However, there are significant environmental, archaeological, infrastructure constraints on any further expansion, and they need to be weighed in the balance against need and alternative opportunities at a proper time in the context of a sustainable assessment and SEA at that time. And we'd urge you not to allocate for further strategic development any more land at Billingshurst at this time, for those reasons.
Okay, there was a few points to come back on there. So you mentioned flooding. Well, we can look at this in a sort of large village, town-wide, manner. I mean, I think there's sort of, what should I call it, social infrastructure. So we've got healthcare and schooling there. Physical infrastructure, I'd like to discuss a bit more the flooding issue. Are there any issues with water supply, flooding? There's also transport infrastructure, and then we'll come on to the sort of, if you like, the social impact as well. But I'm going to take a break, I think, and we'll come back and deal with those. And I'll be looking at the developers to sort of making comments about those points when we come back. We'll take just 10 minutes. We'll be back at 25 to 11, please. Is everyone ready, please? Right, I listed out a few matters that I'd like to just have a little bit more discussion on, please, just before the break there, and looking towards I'd like to hear the site promoters' comments about facilities. School capacity, secondary school capacity comes to mind. I mean, primary schools tend to go with the numbers, but obviously with trying to think what we've got here. So we've probably got the need for another school, haven't we, with the 700, and certainly another school with the 1,200.
Sorry, sir, just before I respond to that, can I just raise just 2 points which I would like to raise before the break? One was on your helpful list. Could we have a chat about the role of the site in the Gatwick Diamond, please? Because there's been 2 comments that the site isn't well.
Yeah, sure, that wasn't an exclusive list.
But it's a helpful agenda, sir. Secondly, I think Mr. Collins has a comment on the Billingshurst approvals and the evidence that the council put in, which may be better cleared up now, sir, rather than come back in an hour and a half, 2 hours' time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sorry, thanks, Ian. Just a couple of points on what the council was saying beforehand. It's just for clarification more than anything, but obviously we did have a look at their table 1 in their statement on the number of units consented. I just had a couple of queries, if that's okay, sir. First one was on Hammond's East Street, which is at the top one on the table, DC 09-1919. It says it's got consent for 203 dwellings. We did some research on the council's website and it came up with the figure of 14 dwellings for that site, so quite a difference. Now, it's just a clarification more than anything, because we then looked at the site and I think it's been built out as well at 14. So we just didn't know if that was an error in the table or whether there had been another application that's been approved for nearer that level of dwellings. It's quite a substantial amount, obviously.
Yeah, okay, I'm not going to go nitpicking the little numbers, but if that's okay.
But that's the first point. Just a couple more observations as well based on that table. A few of the sites are completed, so they're not, if you like, in the supply moving forward. So for example, the Townland site at Coombe Hill has been completed. That's 19 dwellings. There's 59 dwellings completed at Saddler's Close, 34 Saddler's Close. And if you like, the net effect of that, in our opinion, is that there are about 837 dwellings permitted which are yet to be built and brought forward in the town, rather than the 1,185 figure from the council. Happy to be corrected, but
yeah. Well, the figures run from when do they run from? Actually, that's the question, isn't it? Is it 2011? Your housing figures. What's the start of the plan period?
The start of the planning period is 2011, so this is just a snapshot of applications that are around in that time. We do know that some of them are completed and in train, but this is to show that there's that Billingshurst now and in the past has been making its contributing to the strategic housing delivery of the district.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it'd be useful to know to relate that to Table 2. I mean, are you saying that all of these, even if they have already been completed, were completed between 2011 and 2013, or now? And what about this 200-odd discrepancy on the East Street site?
I have to go back and check that one. On East Street, there were a number of applications with different names and numbers. We've had an awful lot of applications in Billingshurst, so we'll have to check that. But these are sites that are being built or have been built in recent years and are coming forward at the moment as well.
Yeah, okay. Well, but I mean, I think it's a fair question, Mr. Conley. I mean, I'd quite like to know, from my point of view, how many of those, are they all legitimately counted within the commitments section of policy, what was it, 14, isn't it?
Some of these sites do...
14B, so are all of those 1,185 legitimately within 14B?
We know for sure there was 800 units being delivered in Billingshurst in the plan period from 2011 onwards. Obviously, these are parts of sites. This shows the volume of development and the size of sites that are being delivered in Billingshurst. It's not as if there's one or two units. There are quite sizable planning applications that have been approved recently and in the future, but we estimate that 800 units are coming through in the plan period in that part B of the policy 14.
Right. So some of these would have either been built before that then?
That's possible.
Or there might be an error.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to. Well, if you can let us know about that, please, that would be helpful.
That would be helpful as well, sir, because I think what the council have just said is that the plan includes essentially 800, 850, whatever the figure is, inherent within that policy 14 figure of existing commitments. I think that's what the council's position is in terms of forward planning for Billingshurst. So no allocations, just approvals. It would be helpful to see an updated table on that, actually.
So we're just having that checked now, but can I just also give the correct number for households in Table 2 for 1991? The figure is 2122.
Okay. So the 62%'s right.
The percentage was correct. It was just a typing error. That figure was put in.
Quick mental arithmetic confirms that, I think. Yeah, okay. Right, Mr. Painting?
Sorry, can I just come back on another few points before the break? Is that okay? Okay. Well, is any quick ones? Because there was a point where you said was it or wasn't included in the preferred options. Just to clarify, as I understand it, the preferred option stage, 500 units were included in the plan. My point was what wasn't included was the original 1750, which was the whole of the eastern side of Billingshurst. So
that wasn't included.
That wasn't the whole lot. So I think the council's position at the time was they were backing the 500 scheme,
which is the one that's got
which
permission.
has now got planning permissions. Hence, is why it's dropped out of the plan.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
because
understood
at the time,
that.
Yeah. So I think you have. I just wanted to be sure on that point. Thank you.
Okay then. Well. It's still over to you then. Can we start talking about some of these? Sorry, I'll add in. I've forgotten it, so just remind me. I should have written it down. Gatwick Diamond.
Diamond. What of something in the Gatwick Diamond, sir? So shall I start off?
Well, I was thinking of. I'd just do it the way I've just. The things that came up first. Healthcare. Clearly, there would be a need for more healthcare facilities and another GP surgery or whatever.
Yes, sir. If I just help you, and hopefully the parish will agree. The 475 approval was quite a helpful starting place because of the process which we went through with the parish to arrive at a point whereby, even though the parish maintained a objection to the principle of the scheme, I'd like to think that if the principle was agreed with the council, that the scheme itself was the best scheme possible to meet the needs of the parish in terms of social and community facilities. Therefore, in terms of a doctor's surgery, there is an existing doctor's surgery practice, quite a large practice, very efficient and good practice in Billingshurst, and the scheme, as approved, provides the option of land for the GP surgery to expand to meet the needs arising from the approved scheme. And there's nothing in my mind that tells me, sir, that the healthcare needs in terms of GP surgery care, sir, would not be met by a similar way, either by the expansion of the current surgery or the provision of a new outline or satellite surgery in the format that the GPs and the NHS agreed was the appropriate means, sir. So, yes, sir, there will be a need to increase healthcare provision. And yes, sir, there's an easy mechanism, as already evidenced by the approval, for that need to be met, sir.
Okay. Schools?
Schools, sir. The approved scheme, the county work off, Mrs. Charles will correct me, I'm sure, the county work off a rough estimate of each 1,000 houses creates a need for one form of entry per level, one form of entry per primary, one form of entry for secondary, sir. The approved scheme. No,
I'm just checking back to what was put before me yesterday, and I think that's. I'm not sure that was right with primary, but it must be, I suppose. Thinking about it, yeah, okay. Carry on, yeah.
In Oxfordshire, sir, it's a higher number, but we won't go on to Oxfordshire to widen it, but it's around that number, sir. The 475 scheme is a two-layered approach to primary education, in that it provides land for one form entry school, which would meet the needs of that scheme, because you don't build half a class, sir, you build a whole class, sir. With the reservation and offer of further land, should it be needed by the county, to be brought forward to accommodate a three-form entry school site, sir. So there's already in place sufficient land in the approved scheme to meet the needs of circa 3,000 new homes in Billingshurst, sir, at a primary level.
Primary level, yeah.
And the county, and Mrs. Charles will correct me, I'm sure if I'm wrong, will take the normal pro rata payments, either through 106 or SIL, wherever we are in that process, sir, to fund that level of provision, sir. Secondary is always a bit more interesting, sir, due to the nature of the catchment areas and how you work out.
Yeah. We've had all that yesterday.
So
what's the position in Billingshurst?
I won't bore you with that, sir. The position is, and Mr. Collins will come into this, is that the Weald School have identified or consulting upon, sir, a process of increasing capacity by two forms of entry, sir. The first form of entry is to meet the planned growth of 500, as is the approval, sir, and therefore, sir, the additional capacity could meet the needs arising from further release of land at Billingshurst, notwithstanding the fundamental point, sir, which I always reiterate, sir, is that you don't set the district spatial strategy on the basis of existing schooling. You set your education strategy in accordance and reflecting the appropriate spatial strategy, sir. and adjustments to catchment areas, and we discussed sibling issues, etc., etc. But my understanding, there is no secondary capacity issue which limits further growth at Billingshurst.
Just to add to that, sir, our understanding is the Weald School is expanding from September 2015 to 10 forms of entry. So that's acknowledged on the Weald School's website, and also from information we've got from West Sussex County Council.
Yeah, so that would account for the 475. So what you're saying to me is that they've got room to expand for another form of entry for...
Well, as Mr Painting said, there's two ways of doing it. You either have a further expansion of the Weald, or you amend the Weald School's catchment boundaries.
So the short point, sir, 475 equals half a form of entry at secondary level, sir. Yeah. And therefore, in my understanding, there's sufficient capacity and already been planned for further growth if needs be, sir. Okay,
I've not heard. Okay. Yeah, we did. I heard about this yesterday. The county weren't. We had discussion about how future needs might be met at Southwater or North Horsham. There was quite a discussion about that. Okay. Do the council want to comment on any of these as we go through them point by point?
So in the absence of the County Council representative today, I was provided with a note, and the note that I was given was that the expansion of the school would take place from 2016. I think Mr Collins mentioned 2015. But that would take the school to a capacity of something like 1,800 students. The Weald does have a sixth form element within the school.
Mr Nicholson, can you add anything factually on this?
I'm aware the Education Authority has consulted recently on the expansion of the secondary school. My understanding was that didn't accommodate the existing planning permission. It wasn't meant to accommodate the existing planning permission for 475. But I have no direct evidence to help you beyond that understanding. Well, the reason I raised
the permission would have had to have allowed for some...
our information is taken from the school website. I'm happy to accept Barbara Charles' information as that's from the county. It matters little. It's a year later. The development we're talking about here, as you see from evidence, will be coming on stream in years 4 and 5 of the 5-year supply.
Okay, can we short circuit this? Is the council's not saying it's a constraint?
From the information that I've got, it's a constraint for further development, but not necessarily a constraint for the 475, the permitted development. But from the information that I have before me, the school is at capacity, which is why investment is being made to the one form of entry, and that is anticipated to be fully accounted for. But I can certainly go back to the county to ask for further advice.
That sort of leaves it hanging a bit, doesn't it? Well, if there is anything, you'll have to send me a written note, please, and I have to go on the website and I'll take comments on it.
Just to be clear, Ms Charles referred to one form of entry there. Was that an incorrect statement? The school's going from 8 forms of entry to 10, so it's a big expansion, 1,500 to 1,800 places.
At the moment, it has around 1,600 children, 320 of which are in sixth form. It's slightly difficult in the Weald's case to talk about forms of entry because of the sixth form contribution, but the advice that I've been given from county, it was a one form of entry increase. But as I said, I'm very happy to go back and clarify that in a written note for you, sir.
Okay. Let's move on then. Physical infrastructure, flooding was mentioned by the parish council. Where does that occur, and what's the proposals here? Would there be any problems with the SUD scheme increasing flows out of the site?
Thank you, sir. Again, the 475 approval was quite useful because we went through this process with the parish and the council, etc., in that time. The issue on flooding, as I understand it, and again the parish, please correct me, is the sewers that serve the existing Billingshurst are combined. So in periods of heavy rainfall, they can back up, sir. Mm-hmm. The 475 scheme, so as you correctly point out, sir, is a SUDS-based scheme, so therefore greenfield runoff is attenuated to greenfield rates or better. Therefore, the point we made at that point of the application was that the scheme actually would have the benefit of regulating peak flow during sudden downpours, etc., and therefore would assist the capacity of the flow from the brooks, that flow from the watercourse that flow from the site through the Billingshurst as it stands today. The FOW strategy actually bypasses Billingshurst in total. The FOW strategy, as approved, is to pump northwards and to run through the new FOW sewer that runs along the western bypass, and therefore does not even rely upon capacity in any shape or form of the existing network. And again, the advice I have, sir, is that...
Where does that go then? To South Horsham?
It goes to the Billingshurst wastewater treatment works.
Oh, right.
There will be the need for off-site reinforcement, sir. We'll have a normal debate with the Water Board about timing of that and who funds it. Is it in their plans or our plans, etc., sir. There is, however, known as I've seen, that there is a showstopper that says a scale of development as we propose could not be addressed, could not be served, could not be drained, etc., be it power, gas, etc., sir. And as I said, the 475 scheme shows, because these issues were rained against us at that stage, shows that there is a ready solution, sir.
Yeah, so what about the additional... So what you're saying is surface water through the additional 700 or 1,200 could be attenuated through a SUD scheme in the same way as a 475.
Indeed, need to be, sir.
And that foul water also would have to be dealt with and might require extra capacity at Billingshurst, but that would have to be provided for by the developers.
Indeed, sir.
And is included in your viability appraisal, no doubt. Okay. Any comments on that from the council?
I'd say that obviously this, we're saying that this Billingshurst is delivering a strategic level of growth, which is through the 475 planning application that overtook our planning process. And Mr. Painting is quite right that it does wash its own face, and it's a greenfield runoff rate. I can't see how it's going to be greater than greenfield runoff rate. It actually doesn't attenuate or do flood risk attenuation on the site. There is the Parbrook, which crosses the site, this larger sites, and there is a flood zone associated with it. We did do a sequential test for Billingshurst. It is a low-risk flood zone, but any additional impact on the sewer, and as you say, with it being a joint sewer between surface water and storm water, would mean that there would be this matter would need to be addressed. The 475 site doesn't address. It slows down. It doesn't contribute worse to the flows of the surface water runoff. It only attenuates its own site. There is still an issue with surface water runoff in Billingshurst that needs to be addressed on a continual basis.
Well, yes, but I mean it's not.
So if I may say, these are matters for a detailed EIA and planning application in terms of the actual design SUDS scheme. I think what we're hearing is that the Billingshurst is not in a flood zone. It's low risk in flood terms, and that there are no capacity showstoppers to prevent additional development in and around.
Well, that's what I'm obviously testing here. Is there anything that's going to prevent it? Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Mr. Nicholson.
Thank you. If I can help you, 2 points. One, in my presentation earlier, I didn't suggest that the current permitted development was inappropriate on flooding grounds. The Parish Council understands the greenfield runoff rate has been applied and will be met. It also understands that that is the appropriate test to apply at this time in the context of current knowledge. but is always and regularly maintained that there is a problem in the watercourses to the east and the south of the village that are unexplained, either by the Drainage Authority, County Council, or by the EA. And it's taken the initiative in the last few months and has secured an understanding with both those organisations that there should be a proper study done of the situation. There are 600 properties at risk in what is regarded as a wet spot by the County Council, and there are only 6 wet spots in the county, and this is one of them, and that they've agreed to work with us to seek funding to carry out a proper comprehensive study to understand what's happening in those watercourses in order to inform decisions about how and whether, indeed, development should take place beyond those sites that have been permitted at the present time. My reference to time for assimilating the development that's been granted planning permission to date was just that. It was not intended to be a criticism of any of the permissions that have been granted, but merely questioning the wisdom of making a further strategic allocation, or indeed an allocation for a strategic level of further development in Billingshurst at this time, pending the completion of those studies and pending, more critically, time for the community to assimilate the very considerable growth that's been heaped upon it in the last few years.
Well, that's a different point. I'm just trying to break it down, into whether there really is. I'm fed up with hearing this phrase from Mr. Vickery, but a showstopper, a fundamental reason why this shouldn't go ahead. And what I'm hearing from the developers is that your 600 properties affected by the wet spot is not really going to be affected by their proposals because they'll deal with their own runoff. We understand that. Right, okay. And foul water's another issue as well. Okay. Mr. Perrins, you might have something to say about that with regard to your site a bit later on, but we'll pass on for now. Transport. Now, the council's statement talks about the A272 being at capacity. Do you want to just tell me whether you think there's a real issue here and what the SA says, and are you saying that this development shouldn't go ahead on transport highways grounds? We'll deal with other transport in a minute. That's a question to you.
So we're just looking up, so we'll just come to you.
Well, someone wrote it. It's in paragraph 42.2. Now, my question was related to that. And then there's another point about parking at the station, but we'll come on to that in a minute.
I think going back to the sustainability appraisal, that kind of goes back to some of the arguments yesterday about that was done on an individual basis rather than an instead of. So if the site was to come forward, it would need to look at some of the cumulative impacts in addition to North Horsham and South Water, so that would be a consideration.
Okay, but Mr. Kay, do you want to say what you think about highways capacity to start off with?
Yeah, historically there has been capacity issues associated with the A272, particularly at the junction of East Street and the High Street. So the capacity issue is more of a junction capacity problem rather than necessarily a link capacity problem, which the comments from HTC suggest when they mention specifically the movement east and west along the A272. The consented scheme, or the 475 scheme, does deliver a new connection between the A272 and the A29, which allows effectively a localised bypass of that particular pinch point at the street and the high street. So there's a clear benefit arising from that development, a benefit which also exists in connection with the subsequent assessments that we've carried out of the remaining development north of the railway line, the additional 700 dwellings. We've included in our...
So you've tested that?
Yeah, we've included... It's the last page of Appendix 2 of the Savile statement includes a detailed junction capacity assessment of the new consented roundabout on the A272, which demonstrates that the additional infrastructure provided locally allows for that reassignment of traffic to take place and for capacity to be delivered in that way. One of the clear benefits of doing so is that further improvements can be made in terms of pedestrian connections along East Street to the town centre, and including potential further public realm enhancements within the town centre itself.
Yeah. So in your statement, is that Appendix A to the... it's an appendix to an appendix, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Appendix A of Appendix 2, yes, sir. It's literally the last page is where we presented the capacity assessments.
And those... So the committed, you're saying the 2023 baseline plus committed, so that's plus the 475?
Yeah, we've tested the 475 committed plus an additional 750.
Well, you got 500 in one and then 750 in another.
Yes, that's correct, yes, sir.
But you haven't tested the 1,200 extra then?
No, we have not, sir.
Okay, Mr. Painting, any comment on the 1,200 or not?
No, sir. My experience when I was running the 475 through the process was that locally the scheme, the network can take the wider area, sir. There's no evidence in front of you, so I don't want to burden you with it, sir. Can I point you to the master plan in the back of my document, sir? Because I think just Barbara Charles and the parish and I can remember this. When the western expansion was being looked at, there was a host of evidence before the local planning inquiry at that point in time which looked at Billingshurst transport links and the role of the A272, as it were, sir. Essentially, the western development provided a north-south bypass that left the east-west A272 link as unmet, as it were. The 475 starts that, sir, in that it plans a new relief road. We had a long debate about whether we should do an outer relief road or a spine road, etc. I can imagine those debates take some time. But the agreed solution was a spine road, which has now got approval for, sir. If the remainder of the land comes forward, sir, that would enable the continuation of that route and effectively relieve the A272 where it goes east of Billingshurst and turns right towards the railway line by providing a continuation of that spine road, sir, relieving the traffic onto the A272, sir. In terms of wider network issues, I think the council...
Well, hang on. So, what are you saying? That effectively, what stays the major route? On the northern part of the site, it comes from the roundabout, it's the A29, isn't it? And then round to another roundabout. Yeah, are you then saying the A272 reverts back onto its existing alignment?
As approved, sir, yes. As approved.
Okay. And then you've then just got another, what you call a structural street?
Yes, sir.
There, which comes out just north of the railway bridge
yes,
on the existing A272?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. And there's no other capacity issue on the A272 arising from...
Not that I've seen, so not that I've advised.
Right, okay, Mr Kay.
If I could refer you to figure 6.1 on page 21 of the appendix to statements on transport. We've undertaken an assessment of all the potential access points that could be possible from a eastern Billingshurst development, and we've gone through sequentially assessing the extent of the highway boundary, the type and configuration that the access could take in respect of visibility, in respect of capacity, and through that process of analysis and sifting, we've established that there are 3 good candidate junctions in terms of providing means of access to the development. To the east, you have what is termed on that drawing the southeastern access, which is effectively the connecting junction, which would lie at the end of the potential continuation of the development spine road that originated from the new consented roundabout. You've got the consented roundabout itself, which we've discussed, and which the detailed junction capacity assessments at the back that we've referred to relate to. And there's also the potential for improved access to the west through a junction or an access off Brookers Road. Brookers Road itself provides a means of connectivity for pedestrians and cyclists in relation to the railway station, one of the assets that we haven't yet mentioned in relation to the site. And it also allows for further rationalisation of bus services through the area. So effectively what the development allows us to do through the hierarchy of routes in the master plan, the structural streets and the new connections, is actually improve the overall accessibility to public transport of the whole of the eastern area of East Billingshurst, and of course helping to support those bus services through the additional patronage that would be thereby created by further developments. The railway station, I sort of touched upon that, clearly a key asset of the site, and in the context of, I think it was raised by the parish in terms of the wider accessibility of Billingshurst as a settlement. We've included in figure 7.2 of the transport statement a geographical map showing the wider accessibility of Billingshurst, which is in primarily as a result of the presence of the railway station and the connections that provides for promoting sustainable modes of transport to destinations such as Horsham and Crawley and the other locations shown on that map.
I think that's 7.1 actually. Isn't it? Figure 7.1. Oh, figure 7.2.
Yeah, 7.1 shows the potential.
It's headed 7.2 and got figure 7.1 in it. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I see what you mean, sir. Yes.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. The real 7.1 shows the potential for bus diversions.
I want to come back to the railway station in a minute. Just a minute. Mrs. Charles, do you want to comment?
Yes, thank you very much, sir. I don't have, obviously, the traffic modelling expertise to comment, as you wouldn't expect me to, on WSP's work, and I'm certainly not going to say that there isn't a solution that could be found. I'm sure there probably is. We have been talking to the County Council about the work that has been submitted, but I'm sure you can appreciate that they have not been able to look at this in detail given the short timescales from the submission of the response statements to the actual hearing. So what I would say, sir, is that whilst we hear the WSP expertise that has been submitted, as a district council, we would need to have that ratified by the Transport Authority, the County Council, and we would be listening to their advice on this particular matter. So as it stands at present, we're unable to give our view in terms of how the potential solutions might work. Perhaps I could just comment, please, on the reference to the Spine Road within the master plan that was attached to the representation. The Spine Road, I mean, you're absolutely right. Mr. Painting was referring to the east-west east-west relief road to Billingshurst, and that is something that we have looked at the past. The spine road, as he referred to it, going through the development, which is the permitted development of 475 homes, was there to provide access to the 475 homes. I'm sure that the County Council would have comment on the use of that to extend into the rest of the development to provide a much wider access, particularly as it appears to go directly past the new primary school, the site that has been identified for the primary school. So essentially, I think what's being described as a sort of a bypass and a main spine road linking through to the 272, just immediately north of the railway line. But as I say, it's not my place to comment in detail on the transport infrastructure, but we would go with the advice of the Transport Authority.
So I don't quite understand that. I mean, they're not saying that anyway, but the school is there. But then,
I mean, it's a master planning issue in terms of taking forward a detailed master plan for the site as part of a planning application. I mean, I take the points about the level of scrutiny that's applied on the information submitted, but there are some undeniable benefits of the site in terms of its proximity to the town centre and the range of facilities that are there to support local living. The presence of links to the railway station, which are clearly there for everyone to see. The site is also traversed by a number of public rights-of-way, which allows for the integration between the development with the existing settlement boundary with which the development is actually contiguous with, and the improvements to those links, both the links through the site but also the potential to further improve public realm within the town centre itself through improved links along East Street itself. So there are a number of benefits that don't rely on any form of technical scrutiny to appreciate. So.
I mean, we were looking firstly. Highway capacity. I mean, we're now talking about sustainability. I've just reread the comment in the essay about this. Just to remind me, what how much development was assessed in the essay there east of Billingshurst?
To confirm, the assessment was to cover the whole of SA 118, and that map is, I think, shown earlier in the appendix, so that it was the quantum of development broadly that was being discussed today.
Yeah, okay. Right. And then coming back on, you've made some comments, the council made some comments about the station, I think. Just to sort of finish up on the transport issues, parking, poor parking facilities. I mean, what, would you not, if this were to go ahead, could you not try and get some improvements there from the developers, or would the developers say, we're too close, we don't need, we'd expect people to walk and cycle, and we're giving walking and cycling improvements? I'll take the developers first.
And thank you, sir. If I could just pick up on the transport point and lead on to that, if I may, very quickly. I think where we're at is that WSP have assessed 700. The council are awaiting the comments from the county on that, as it were. We haven't put evidence in on the 1,200, but the comment, I think, on the A29 was related to wider cumulative impact, which goes to the issue of process, which is if you are minded to recommend a higher level of housing requirement and another strategic site, I'd imagine the work that Mrs. Charles referred to would come through that preparation of the main modification and the testing of that main modification through the SASA. I think that's what I think we're at.
Possibly further SA, as I said.
Indeed.
In yes.
Indeed, sir. On the car part, sir, yes, indeed, sir. This is the benefit of planned growth rather than departure application growth, which is if the council gets its policy right and plans properly, issues such as the role of the station, not just in serving Billingshurst needs but local areas, the role of the Arun Valley line in providing a sustainable opportunity for modal shift into the main employment areas of Crawley at Gatwick can be tested through and provided through a properly planned scheme, as it were, sir. So on my list of matters that my client and I are talking about, also with Cress, is how any release of further land at East Billingshurst relates to the station, how we plan for the opportunity, not just meeting the need of the scheme, but actually how it enhances the opportunity presented by what is quite rare normally, is a site being right on top of a station, sir. So it's on the list, sir, and it can be addressed for the properly planned release of land, sir.
Well, yeah, it might be on the list. I mean, what I'm testing is as you've just said, at a higher level, but there's, as part of that testing, I'll go and have another look at the station, but I need to just sort of be sure that there is capacity if necessary.
Yeah, so
and there's no constraint that would stop that happening.
The capacity point is on the station car park itself, sir, which is a relatively narrow piece of land, sir. And the proposals we're looking at are the provision of a new expanded station car park, sir, which should provide a short walking distance up to the station itself, sir.
In whose land ownership?
Well, we'll be looking at issues such as around the Crest land, etc., also on the land to the south as well, sir. South of the railway line, sir, because it is quite a short walk, sir, from the station to the boundary of the site, sir.
Yeah. Anything from the council on that before I move on?
No, thank you, sir.
Okay. Okay, well that sort of follows on more. I'm going to finish off on social impact and cohesion, but among other things, we've still got landscape impact. You wanted to make a point about Gatwick Diamond and economy. Do you want to take that now, and then we can...
Yes,
sort
please,
of follows on from transport almost.
If I may, sir, the references to Gatwick Diamond, it comes out in the council's statement, which is a statement that other sites are better suited to meeting the housing needs arising from the role of the Gatwick Diamond, etc., etc., sir. And I'm just mindful, sir, the impression I have, sir, is that the council are applying the Gatwick Diamond. You've seen the concept drawing in the framework, with a diamond going around Horsham down to Brighton. The Gatwick Diamond is not a spatial designation, sir. And my fear, sir, is the council are reviewing the comparative merits of sites as if it were. If you were applying a spatial designation, you would inform the boundaries of the site, not by drawing a straight line between Horsham and Brighton, sir. You would inform that based on issues such as functional relationships, transport links, etc.
Well, accessibility would be a key
sir.
factor.
And therefore, you'd have a much more variable line, sir. And the point I've made consistently, which isn't addressed in the SEA, and the transport summary at paragraph 7.48 is remarkably brief compared to the foregoing topic matters, is actually Billingshurst is well placed to provide the opportunity for a modal shift in transport connection to the Gatwick Diamond, sir. It cannot be right, sir, that if a site is spatially within the diamond as shown in the concept plan, it is meeting more appropriately the needs than a site that's out with, sir. I think that's the way the council has approached it, sir.
Okay, any comments on that?
I'll just make a brief point on the sustainability appraisal comments. I think there's sort of two things being discussed here, really. That is, the way the sustainability appraisal has been undertaken in terms of looking at the sites is to try and compare different sites to see which is the most sustainable and therefore which should come forward. Broadly speaking, the outcomes for any large strategic development is that there are going to be knock-on impacts and increases in transport. That's why there's sort of an overall negative impact. But broadly, it's the assessment taking into everything that then leads you to the conclusion that we have, which is the hierarchy of sites, i.e. the most two sustainable that we, from our perspective, were obviously North Horsham and Southwater. And that's sort of slightly different from the sort of specifics about whether it's possible to bring something forward on an individual site and in terms of overcoming the constraints.
Yeah, but that. What about this point about how does the SA recognise sort of functional relationships and with the Gatwick Diamond? And it certainly crossed my mind, to be honest, that in sustainability terms, that this is. We've been talking about rail access and whether or not it's going to come forward in North Horsham or what happens at west of Southwater and this is. I mean, it's not that. How long does it take to get into Horsham from Billingshurst?
9 minutes.
10 minutes, 9 minutes?
9 minutes
okay.
on the train.
And then Gatwick, another sort of less than half an hour, isn't it?
Yeah, so when looking at the Gatwick Diamond boundary, you're absolutely right, there is no firm spatial boundary, and one could argue the entire district is within the Gatwick Diamond. Nevertheless, the LEP is quite clear that Horsham and Crawley form the heart of the Gatwick Diamond, and therefore the area in the northwestern part of our district clearly has a much closer relationship to the Gatwick Diamond. That does not mean to say that Billingshurst doesn't have a role. And
that's the point. It might do in physical proximity, but in terms of functional and real accessibility, in terms of time, in terms of isochrones, it might not.
Okay. I'll hand over to Mrs.
Well, that's the point.
The
I might be missing something. I don't know. Tell me. Fine.
The SHMAR update CDH04 verified the 2012 update and the original 2009 study, in which they looked at the travel to work patterns and the functional economic area and the housing market area. And we're not planning this according to the diamond on the front of the Gatwick Diamond website. It's based on the maps that are in those 3 documents that have been verified with the 3 iterations, which shows that the Gatwick Diamond travel to work area there's a break point in part way through in the southern part of the district. In the southern part of the district where Billingshurst is starting to lie, the travel to work patterns go towards the coast, and so that's the piece of evidence that we should be using. Obviously there is a train line at Billingshurst. It is a stopping service, and it does have limited parking facilities, so it's not getting away from the fact that Billingshurst is an accessible location, but it's getting further away. And if I even draw your attention to figure 7.2 in the WSP report, it shows the travel accessibility times, and it shows that the Crawley and Gatwick Airport is 51 to 60 minutes in this sort of heat. That diagram there on page. I haven't got a page number. Sorry, figure 7.2. So it's getting further away. Our strategic sites of North Horsham and Southwater are delivering the growth for the Gatwick Diamond, and this strategic growth in this particular location would be less for the Gatwick Diamond because it's further out and it's on the edge of the housing market area, but it's that much further away from the coastal area that would actually provide for the coastal market area either.
Okay, I'll come back on that. Yeah.
Yes, please, sir.
Parents, I think.
Yes, please, sir. Sorry, I apologise.
Thank you. It's just an observation, really, on page 82 of the sustainability appraisal, which looks at the economy and retail issues. The numbers of housing proposed for East of Billingshurst scores a significant positive impact, although in recognition of being outside the Gatwick Diamond, we're hearing now that being outside of the Gatwick Diamond is a negative position. But in the sustainability appraisal, the opposite view is expressed. Just an observation, really.
I think we just need to get back to the fact that the sustainability appraisal here, this is an options assessment comparing the relative merits of different sites. We're not necessarily saying, and that's taking into account every single category weighed in the round, looking at social, environmental and economic impacts. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing, but it might well be that there are other sites which are closer to, depending on the site, closer to Crawley, closer to Horsham, that therefore perform better. But it's not saying necessarily that it's a bad thing. It's this assessment was done in terms of how you allocate sites, looking at which site would be most sustainable, looking in the round and doing that comparison, not necessarily cherry picking individual points.
Okay, and we've for those of you that weren't here yesterday, we had some discussion about the assessments on pages that's around 80-ish and page 190-ish in terms of the earlier assessments and overview that incorporates different elements of the more detailed assessments further back. Mr. Painting, anything on this? Just this go on because it's quite an important part of the overview discussion, I think.
If I can frame the question in a different way, sir. If you were to conclude that there's a need for another 1,000 homes over the plan period, sir, to meet the needs of the district and the wider area, sir, listen to the council's evidence, you would put that at Southwater, because Mrs. Charles told me last Thursday that was more sustainable than Billingshurst, sir. But that's a car-based, a road-based transport solution, sir. There's no opportunity. You're not likely to drive your car to Park and Ride, get the bus into Horsham, wait for the train and get the train to Gatwick, for example. The opportunity for modal shift, which must be at the heart of the spatial plan for Horsham, should be looking to extenuate and take the point in this question of weighting, but there's no weighting in here. There's no recognition in the range of matters that the council has to grapple with. There's no weighting as to how it's apportioned more importance to some than others, sir. And my short point is that weight has not been recognised and the opportunity for mainline connection has not been recognised, sir.
Okay. Do you want to come back on that or not?
Yeah, we did discuss this broadly the other day, but in terms of doing a sustainability appraisal, you have to look at each category which is identified. That goes back to Appendix 6, what the key sustainability issues for the district are, and that is a balance of those. And actually we've had correspondence sort of dating back to earlier sustainability appraisals that this goes back to the Environment Agency, and they would object to the actual process. If we did weight it, it's drawing the balance between the social, the economic and environmental impact in terms of the definition of sustainable development set out in the MPPF.
Okay. Anything else on transport, Mr. Collins?
It's just to add to Mr. Painting's point, which I agree with, is if you read the essay at the back, and we have been guilty of cherry picking in our representations, but we've done so deliberately because it's a cumulative effect of various different assumptions have been made against various different factors, which have, in our opinion, underscored the due sustainability merits of Billingshurst. That's a broader point. You can take that from our reps, but every single site has got negative or significant negative transport effects in this SA. That is a fact, including the ones that are proposed for allocation. And what I just don't understand is that doesn't seem to recognise the strategic rail network, obviously the Arun Valley line running up to Crawley, and hence has no weighting for places such as Pulborough, Billingshurst, Horsham or Crawley. Crawley will be discussed tomorrow, sir, but relative to Crawley, for example, is the Fastway bus network there, which has a significant opportunity for modal shift in those locations. So it's an observation on that point, which I think is a failing of the SA, because it needs to look at those things so that you can make a due assessment over Southwater versus Billingshurst or Henfield versus Horsham or whatever. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Mayle, do you want to comment on transport sustainability?
Yes, sir. Just
where you're representing owners who own part of the site.
Yes, sir. Can I just explain?
Crest have got options on, have they?
Yes. The Gillingham family historically were large farmers and owned large tracts of land in Billingshurst and to the east of Billingshurst and further afield.
Yeah.
So they still own the Rosier Business Park, which is just north of the railway line, which is a brownfield site, within the site being promoted by Bellway. They also own Rosier Wood to the south of the railway, and they also have an interest in the land that's being promoted by Bellway. Okay. So that's the background to the Gillingham family. So yes, in my representations on north of Horsham, my written reps, I raised the problem of Network Rail allowing new railway stations. So north of Horsham relies upon agreement with Network Rail and having a new railway station there.
Yeah, I'm not going back. We had plenty on that.
But even if you put a railway station there, you won't have the activity that you have at Billingshurst, as Mr Painting mentioned. You're so close to the railway station, both the land north and south of the railway station, and there is scope on land to the south for additional car parking facilities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Does the council want to finish off on this, and then we'll move on to the other topics? You don't have to. I always give the council the opportunity to have the final say. You're defending your plan on.
Well, thank you for giving us that opportunity. I mean, all I would say is that there are a number of unknowns. The transport work in particular is something which needs to be scrutinised, and whereas all the sites that are actually allocated in the plan clearly have been through that level of scrutiny with the relevant evidence base.
Yeah, okay, well, I think we've covered that point. We'll finish up on social cohesion, landscape impact. I'll take that with...
Yes,
as I've said, I've had a quick look at the site. I'd like your permission to go on to it if I need to. As I said, I will be doing some unaccompanied, and that applies to everyone. Is that okay?
It's probably worth pointing out, sir, that our site has a number of public rights of way crossing it, so you can quite easily see it.
All right, but fine, I'll do that.
But obviously, do get in touch via the programme officer if you want to actually get on the field. So.
No, I've said I will do visits as well, and after I've heard the evidence at the hearing, so. And I'll try and do them unaccompanied if at all possible, unless there's a health and safety issue or other reason why I definitely need to be accompanied. Okay, landscape then. I mean, there's a dispute about this, I think. Or are you saying it is a relatively sensitive landscape, but the benefits outweigh that? Or are you disputing the council's sort of designation and comments about the landscape value of the site?
Yes, thank you, sir. We're obviously aware that the baseline documents is the landscape capacity assessment carried out by the council, and I think it's fair to say that looking at the whole of Billinghurst, as indicated in the planning for Zone 4 within that document, it shows the relative sensitivity as assessed around the town. And that shows it either as having a no or low capacity or a low medium capacity. So we're in an area where there's different shades of suitability. We would say that in relation to the site that's identified as landscape character area 48, which comprises the Bellway and the Crestland north of the railway, that is one of the better sites in terms of its suitability. There are other sites that are shown as having lower capacity either side of them. And I think it's worth as well just drilling down into the capacity study itself, because one ends up with a summary in the sustainability appraisal that says low, medium capacity, whereas in the actual page 68 of the capacity assessment, it looks at character area 48 specifically, and it identifies the landscape character sensitivity as separate from other factors. So for a large-scale housing site, which it defines as 500 plus, the character sensitivity is seen as being moderate high, but the visual sensitivity is moderate, and the landscape value is moderate, which gives to an overall finding of low moderate capacity. And I think I just wish to point out really that the visual sensitivity is moderate. It's relatively low, and I think part of that is because, as you'll see on site, the site, we believe, is very well contained by the structure of the landscape with strong shores and woodland blocks and strong hedgerows, and they would act in a very positive way to compartmentalise development. We talked about simulation in terms of the community, but in terms of simulating a development into the landscape, we believe that the structure of the landscape is such that would allow that to take place. And in terms of landscape value, again, it's seeing having a moderate value. And in terms of the actual adjacent site already approved, the 475 site, that had a combination of no low capacity and moderate low as well. So it hasn't been a factor that's prevented development going ahead and being suitably planned to be accommodated. It's a sensitivity one needs to relate to, and some of these factors can be covered in the detailed design. And in fact, the document I've sort of looked at addressing in particular is the Appendix 1 of the Council's HDC 10 that actually picks out a number of points, and it suggests how, by various landscape mitigation measures, the effect would be reduced somewhat. And the actual master plan we've come up with, and I was involved in informing the master plan in terms of my own site work and working with David Locke on this scheme, has been to retain a lot of the key features. So the higher land identified to the northeast, that is retained as open space, one of the more sensitive areas. All the woodland blocks and the tree belts and hedgerows, they are also retained, apart from where localised access would be required. The nature conservation area that is noted to the east of the site, as mentioned in the sustainability appraisal, that would also be retained and protected, as would all the rights of way would be integrated. There is also mention as well about the need to protect the setting of Little Doe Farm, the listed building on the site on Crestland, and also Rosier Farm, 2 Grade 2 listed buildings. And I believe that the layouts actually allow for a protection and provision of a suitable setting for both of those buildings within the open space and structural layout presented on the illustrative plan. So I believe that the scheme, it is a sensitive landscape in some respects, but one that can still accommodate development to this scale. And in fact, the point I just make as well in terms of the numbers, in terms of on that page 68 of the landscape capacity assessment, it suggests that the capacity for up to 500 houses on this area is moderate. And I don't think there's anything magical about going between 500 and 501 houses. It's a point on a continuum. So it's more about not the numbers, but the type of the receiving landscape that this would go into. And I think that this is a receiving landscape that's got a higher capacity because of its structure, as opposed to a completely open site that would perhaps have less capacity for a new development of a certain number. So I think that the moderate can also apply to a development similar to the type we're proposing on the land on both the Bellway and the Crest land.
Okay.
Thank you.
Who's dealing with this? Any comments on that then?
Yeah, I mean, obviously our landscape architect's not here today, but I mean, at the end of the day, the landscape capacity, as assessed in that, shows that there is a lower potential for development without significant impact than other settlements in the district, most notably North Horsham and obviously west of Southwater, which led in part to the council's conclusions. I'm not really in a position to sort of make detailed comments. Obviously, I don't have that level of expertise, but I do have a note that was sent through to us in addition to the note that goes with our statements, our further statements from Matthew Bright, and really he was pulling out the fact that the land south of the railway line is particularly sensitive, and if it helps, we can provide that to you.
Well, I've got the information. I've got the landscape character assessment. I've been looking at that over the last 2 or 3 days. I've got the essay and I've got my eyes and some professional experience of looking at this over some years. So I was going to just go and... I don't find it desperately fruitful to have long arguments in hearings like this about landscape quality. With respect, I take the bullet points that you've made and then I go out and look at the site. Is that okay? Any other?
I think also, sir, what I would encourage you to do is look at the landscape assessment in respect of west of Southwater and North Horsham, and the conclusions it's made, notably for west of Southwater for the additional development there.
Yeah.
And you can compare that to the assessment in relation to Billingshurst as well, because the council's clearly
we'll have to. That's the whole point of this process.
Yeah.
I mean, that came up yesterday.
Okay,
and
so I wasn't here yesterday, so.
Okay, all right. Shall we go on to the social adhesion?
Sir, may I just make a comment, if I may, please?
What do you think the council's missed? Well, What do you think the council's missed? Don't just read out your prepared statement, please.
In their the comments that they've made about landscape, and I wouldn't dispute them, but the features in that landscape, which the gentleman over here has rightly made reference to, which are the shores and the hedgerows, which are well established and have been there over centuries, then they also have a biodiversity importance as well. And they are part of much wider ecological networks. The importance of ecological networks are recognised by the National Planning Policy Framework. And the natural environment, or the environment, including the natural environment, is one of the three principles of three pillars of sustainability. So I do think that account does need to be taken of the biodiversity aspects of what is being proposed, sir. That's my point.
Okay. Mr. Billingsley, isn't it? Yeah. Do you want any comment? Make a comment on that?
No, I quite agree. I think one needs to take due note, and I'm sure as part of any environmental assessment there'll be ecological surveys that be carried out to ensure that the species present were protected.
It's also the areas beyond. It's the wider impact. It's looking at consequences on a landscape scale as well.
Yes, I'd quite agree. Yes.
Yeah, I don't. What happened with the permitted scheme? Were there any issues that came? You must have had to have done surveys.
Yes, indeed, sir. The 475.
Just to give me some idea, and have we got what surveys have we got on this, if any?
You have a full EIA, sir, which tested everything, as you can probably imagine, sir, including bugs and beetles, ecology, flora, fauna, landscape, visual impact, etc., sir. The scheme is a landscape-led scheme, and we spent a lot of time with Mr. Bright, as Mrs. Charles will no doubt recall, in shaping the form of the scheme to fit it into the landscape and to reflect the landscape. And there's key issues there, such as retaining the majority of trees wherever possible, which are worthy of retention. Retention of existing field boundaries, retention of existing hedgerows, etc. All that is accommodated within that scheme of the north of the 475, sir. There are off-site newts, which is referred to in the council statement as well, which are accommodated, sir, and there's mitigation measures agreed with the council on that as well, and the scheme was approved by Natural England as well. So the points raised by the CPRE are valid points, best practice points, sir, all of which were looked at, assessed, accommodated in the 475 scheme, sir, and there's nothing that I'm aware of, sir, which means that there's a different situation, a different scenario, a different approach of best practice, which cannot be followed should further land come forward, sir.
Okay, thank you.
I think I might just reiterate the relative size on the crest land. It's a 26 hectare site, and only 10 hectares is down for built development, which means there's a very large amount that's left for biodiversity and open space.
So can I just come in there?
I'm just checking something first. What the SA says on this.
I think on page 77, if that's helpful at all.
Where's page? Oh.
194.
Yeah. 194 is the. Well, that's landscape biodiversity. How far away is the SAC, the men's SAC?
It's just over the boundary in Chichester District, but this goes back to the findings of the appropriate assessment, which basically find that the bats forage into the district and actually come quite a long way and have been found very, very close to Billingshurst, if not in it. And it's more that the mitigation measures from the appropriate assessment have this bat foraging zone, which covers this area of Billingshurst. So that is something that would need to be looked at. So in terms of the relative weightings of different sites, that was obviously a factor that in the absence of information and going back to the precautionary principle would have to result in a negative impact at that point.
So can I just address this issue for you? I'll pick up Rosa Wood at the very end, sir, but all the other matters, and the help of the Council just agrees this, those are matters which failed to be considered for the 475 scheme, were addressed and agreed. So there's no showstoppers there. There's issues to be addressed. There's no prohibition from Natural England based on the impact of the SSE in the adjacent districts, sir. There are matters which failed to be considered for the ES for 475 and were agreed and addressed, as it were, sir. In terms of Rosa Wood, obviously that's to the south of the site, sir. There was a further scheme granted on appeal, sir, where the impact of residential development south of the rail line in terms of impact on Rosa Wood was again assessed, and the agreed setbacks were agreed through that scheme, sir. So the Council was right. These are matters that would fall to be considered, but they're not matters which cannot be mitigated nor appropriately addressed, and indeed not actually show a net gain, sir. And it would be useful if the Council just agreed that, unless I've missed something, sir.
Well, I'm not sure they will, but if you do you want to agree that or not?
Once we have detailed proposals and evidence base that we can scrutinise and consult on, then we would be prepared to agree or otherwise on what has been submitted. But what we have before is we're simply not in a position to be able to do that at the moment.
No, all right. But then the point, my overview level on this is, I don't think we had this came out yesterday. The way that the scoring in the essay is done, Ms. Howe explained, is if there's not a lot of information, then it just automatically gets a negative impact, and that's been a consistent method of scoring. But from what I'm reading there, is that you've mentioned these, the SNCI and the BATs, but I mean, it says that, that they're primarily to the west, where it doesn't say that they've, is there any evidence has anyone ever found any evidence of bats on the site? Have the developers done any surveys yet, or not?
We've done initial surveys, sir. To save sending you acres of information, we kept our submission to what you had before you. But there is evidence. You'd expect developers to collect evidence on ecology, for example, because you have to do that through the survey seasons. I think, picking up on Mr. Painting's point, I mean, we've got a site here which is not an environmental destination. A small part of the site is an SNCI, but that's not proposed for development, and you'll see from the master plan there's buffers around it. We've got, I mean, the point of
that's a local designation.
That's a local environmental. So there's no national or international designations. The point of the SAC in Chichester, I mean, it's interesting to look at the essay on that very point. It sort of highlights one of the criticisms we've got, because below our site on the same page is an assessment for Adversane, which is a settlement just to the south of Billingshurst, between Billingshurst and Pulborough. If they were being consistent, the SAC should be mentioned for that as well, because it is literally a mile down the road from our site, and it's not, if that makes sense. So I think, for want of a better word, I think the Council are almost clutching at straws on a few of these points, because the material fact is that the site doesn't have a high level of ecological value.
Just to clarify, if you read on page 194 of the sustainability appraisal with regards to biodiversity at Adversane, it makes specific reference to the MENS SAC and the need to consider that. So I don't take that point, I'm afraid.
It's not said on page 77. So.
That's the summary.
Well, oh no, we've been through this. Sorry, that's the summary. We had that.
But also, I noticed this was raised yesterday. But why is it automatically a negative if there's no information? I mean, I'm sure this was all debated yesterday as well. I can listen back.
It was.
But surely it should go back to a neutral if there's no information.
No, because you can't be sure that there's not a negative. I think it was the answer I was given, and that's what. I mean, it does sort of weight things that might be further down the road, I suppose, more positively, if there is more information.
does. I mean, the point is that sustainability appraisal is an iterative process. So you might start off with something, when we started in 2009 that was really dreadful, but as things have come along and more information has become available, we've been able to revise that assessment.
Yes, okay.
If I can just bring to a close.
It's getting near lunchtime. I really don't want to get into a long debate about this.
If I can just bring to a close, because I'm already in the habit of bickering about the SASA, because it won't make me a happier person, so in the long term. The short point is, in the SEA, or those matters that have been raised by the Council, those matters are similar, no different to what have already been assessed through the grant of approvals elsewhere to the land to the east of Billingshurst. So I'd say to you, you can take comfort, sir, that there's evidence that those matters can be appropriately addressed, taking Mrs. Child's point that she hasn't had the EIA for the remainder of the land yet, sir.
No, okay. I'm taking an overview. I think I've got enough there, really. We're not going to finish, are we, by lunchtime? There was the issue of, I don't know how much people would have on the sort of social cohesion points. We've already touched on it.
Sir, if I make a suggestion, we probably have about 20 minutes. I would suggest 15 minutes. So if you were prepared to run slightly later lunch, then we could probably. I'm only speaking for myself, and I think Ian Payton's nodding as well next to me. But that's it.
Well, I think Mr. Perrins might. We've got to come back for Mr. Perrins, haven't we? But I think, unless you've got. From listening to this, you've not got much more to say. I don't mind going on, personally. If we could finish it within another, 20 minutes, half an hour, that would be very good from my point of view.
Yeah.
People happy to carry on for a bit and see how we go?
I'm happy to carry on as long as we have a good debate about our sites as well.
Yeah, we might have to just stop for you. I mean, if we don't quite get there, then we'll do it. Okay, let's do that. Okay, social impacts. Well, the point's already been made. I think, do the developers have any comments about this?
Shall I go first? Yeah. Okay, so just going back in time a little bit, you're aware obviously Billingshurst expanded in the late 90s on the western side with the A29 Western Bypass. We've just gone and looked back at the planning history in Billingshurst. It's probably worth you noting the following. In 1996, the authority granted planning permissions for a total of 555 dwellings in the small town. 1997, it was 509 dwellings. Then there was a bit of a lull, as it were, and it sort of settled around the average of 75 to 100 dwellings per year granted. To my mind, you heard our evidence last week on market capacity side, which I provided on the housing day. That illustrates that there was previous market demand and developer appetite to expand Billingshurst. That remains today, and obviously I speak for Crest Strategic Projects, long-standing track record in this district. Myself, my clients, and obviously Bellway Homes as well, I can speak for them on this point, can confirm the site's available for development and deliverable and viable.
Yeah, just a question, was that sort of trajectory, are you saying that was maintained in Billingshurst through the recession then, sort of after 2000, late 2007, 2008?
Things clearly slowed down, sir, but there's a couple of reasons for that, and it's going back to what I said last week, which is in respect of the planning constraint, but also recessional constraint. I think it's fair to say both things applied. But the net effect of all of that is over a 20-year period between 1991 and 2011, the number of households in the small town increased by the order of 1,200, so 60 per annum. So there is capacity for growth. Now, if we project forward the previous trend, to say we stand still and the town continues to grow at the same trajectory, 60 dwellings per annum over the 20-year plan period equates to 1,200 dwellings in total. In order to achieve that, you clearly need to have planning permissions of that order. I would suggest you should add a 10% contingency to that, which makes 1,320. Now, earlier from the council, we heard evidence of implementable planning permissions in the order of 800, 850 in the town, which are factored for as commitments in Policy 14. Clearly, that is falling short of 1,320, following my analysis just now. So therefore, simply to continue the trend of growth in Billingshurst on past trends over the last 20 years, we are short by some 480 dwellings. So, now, going back to the housing debate, we all know what the NPPF says about significant boost to the supply of housing, positively prepared plans, which are aspirational but realistic. The council is proposing a plan which is not even covering the past trends of growth in Billingshurst. They are seeking to constrain growth in the small town, which I think, given the evidence you had on objectively assessed needs, the location of Billingshurst on the edge of the Gatwick Diamond or within it, depending on which views you take, the sustainability of the location on the Arun Valley main line railway and the services and amenities present is not a sound and positively prepared strategy over the length of the plan. So, in summary, there is scope for the small town to grow more, and the council's not even planning to grow at the level to meet the previous trend of growth that's been exhibited there. Thank you.
Well, yes. This raises the interesting point that I raised on the housing session about, continuing past trends. Now, so I mean, effectively, Billingshurst suffers almost a double whammy here, doesn't it? If they've been taking more growth than another part of the district over the last 10 years, with a sort of 50% expansion in the number of houses in their village, small town, so maybe it becomes a small town. On your argument, in terms of continuing migratory trends, they've just got to carry on doing that in perpetuity.
Well, difficult decisions have to be made, sir. And
so what are you saying? That the growth should be at the same proportional rate, or just at the same rate as
the same proportional rate? There's not enough. There's not enough sites that have been allocated.
Clearly not, because they'd have to grow at another 50% in the 10 years from 2011 to 21, and then they'd have to grow at another. You've got a geometric progression, don't you? So that's clearly not realistic.
It's is it not? I mean, we've provided evidence which showed market capacity for the growth.
So what you're saying, that really to be sound, buildings. Where are the figures? It's in the council's paper. I've put it down somewhere. Sorry. Sorry, bear with me. Oh, here we are. That's partly why I asked for them. 2122 in 1991, 2684 in 2001, 34. So if you take the period there, 34, 52 in 2011, and that was another 30% increase, wasn't it? So 30% of that is another 1,000 to 2011, and then there'll be a bit more, so there'll be another 1,200. So you just keep going, you just keep going on and on and on and on and on.
So it's
my point. I mean, so planning policy, effectively, it's policy driven. I know it's what the NPPF says, that you take migration into account, but I'm not sure that it's necessary. So you say that you take it into account at that rate necessarily.
Well, there's a number of factors here. One's migration, one is sustainability of location and where it's best to grow. The spatial strategy of this authority is not to plan for a new settlement, clearly. Clearly there's others who are promoting that, Mayfields in particular. So therefore the strategy is, as indicated by the SA, strategic urban extensions and then much smaller scale growth via neighbourhood plans. That's the strategy before you, which was tested through the SA, and that was found to be the best one. Clearly in a district where there's only so many options available, our case is that you should be directing growth to the more sustainable locations which are closer to the centre of employments. So therefore you have locations such as Crawley, Horsham and Billingshurst. and we have a plan which has no planned growth in one of those locations, which is Billingshurst. The council, and we accept there are existing extant consents in Billingshurst, but the point, our evidence is that those are not enough to accommodate the additional required development.
Okay, do council have any comments on this?
Well, so I'd only come back on the table 1 that we submitted, which I are now able to confirm that the first number should have been 14, which gives us 996 total, which is identified in policy 14, either through housing completions or through homes that already have permission.
What's the total again?
996. So, to my mind, just short of 1,000 homes in a settlement which we've already identified to be sustainable within the planned period. Those permissions are from 2011 to date, sir, but we think that that is a substantial contribution to the strategy of the district.
You talked about the sustainability of the settlement, Mr. Collins. I mean, that also includes sustainability of the settlement as a cohesive social unit, or whatever. Not a very good phrase, but you know what I mean. Mr. Painting, have any comments on that point?
Thank you, sir. I think I can try to answer the comments from the parish earlier on today. I think the case is Billingshurst has taken its fair share so far in the plan period due to commitments, and in any event there needs to be a breathing space. It's been a long-running theme in my discussions with the parish over the years about the future of Billingshurst, as it were. And the breathing space is required, if I understand the point correctly, to enable the community to bed down and assimilate with the existing community. My view on that, sir, is actually it's false to assume that a mere temporal break in the rate of new housing provision means that the community stands still and then embeds itself, sir. Work I'm doing elsewhere in the country for the eco-town schemes, etc., looking at governance and capacity building in terms of communities. And actually you deal with assimilation through the proper planned growth of a settlement, and looking at not just doctors, dentists, etc., but looking at the functioning of a settlement, its age profile, the retail offer, and actually looking at the social structures, not just the parish council, but the informal group workings as well, and embedding the scheme through planned growth into those networks and into those existing structures. Simply saying we need a 5-year, 10-year, whatever break actually misunderestimates how a community grows and how it develops. And the work we did with the parish and the community in the 475 scheme was quite interesting, how even now the community to the west that came through the 1995 community approvals, there's different parts, and different parts relate to the parish and other parts of the community relate to other social groups, as it were. So therefore there is no magic period. The magic period itself won't achieve assimilation. Assimilation is achieved by properly planned growth and looking beyond the mere provision of doctors and looking at the social structures for the planned growth of a town, sir. And I think
that's why I've put this question. I mean,
indeed,
that's what I mean by not just
absolutely right, sir.
social infrastructure and facilities, but also the impact on the community
and if
in a wider way.
If you look at it from a different way, which is there's a common perception, and again, parish shout, that Billingshurst punches below its weight. So for the work that I did in the 475 scheme, one of the questions we asked through workshops was, how would you like Billingshurst to be? And reference was made to Petersfield, etc., i.e. a functioning local centre with a good broad retail offer, where you could make link trips, etc., actually functioned as a local centre of quality and design. Now, what plans out from that is actually, rather than write about the impact of planned growth or unplanned growth, actually planned growth presents the opportunity, which is the first stage of the contributions to the village centre studies from the 475 scheme. It actually presents the opportunity for augmenting the retail spend, changing the spending patterns of the community, and actually through planned growth, not through ad hoc 50 here, 30 there, as it were, but through a proper strategic allocation, the opportunity of ensuring that that strategic allocation benefits and delivers wider benefits for the community. And I'd say that's more important in achieving a cohesive town, settlement, village, however you want to refer to it, than just saying it's a 5-year break or a 10-year break, sir. And that work was started commendably by my client through the 475 scheme, sir.
I would like the parish council's views on that. You know that you've assimilated quite a lot already. I mean, so Mr. Collins has said there's scope to carry on doing that. Mr. Painting said, there could be benefits from that. Better retail offer maybe in the small town centre, more services, a bit more choice of facilities, supported by more money in the town.
Yes, we acknowledge the point about the contribution that the development of 475 is making towards stimulating a review of the offer in the town centre, the retail offer in the town centre. But in answer to your original question about community strain and ability of a community to assimilate development, we think that there are more issues than just that. It was very interesting to hear the theory about the way in which settlements assimilate new communities that are tacked onto them through community development initiatives, but none have been offered as part of the 475 development. That seems strange, coming from Bellway Homes this morning. Secondly, we're not talking about something that we fear. It's something that the parish has already experienced. It experienced a growth in that order back at the end of the 90s and the beginning of the noughties of an equivalent size, 1,000 dwellings. And it is the experience of the parish council that it did take many years for the new communities in those homes to assimilate into the network of groups and individuals in the established community. And our fear is that if development continues and you recommend that there is further strategic development has to be provided within Billingshurst, then there will not be the opportunity to deal with and assimilate the community that will come in the 1,000 homes that have been permitted in the last 5 years. So it's not born out of fear of what might come, it's born out of experience of what has happened in the recent past. And we're saying we've made a provision towards the strategic development of the district. It's all come in the first 5 years. That's a big ask for a small community to assimilate 30% growth.
Okay, does the council want to comment on that?
I think the parish council have explained it extremely clearly. All I would add to that was that Mr. Painting referred to the need for a break to allow for assimilation of development. I think from what you've heard from the parish council, it isn't actually a break, and indeed the trajectory which was included in Mr. Painting's submission clearly shows development going straight through to 2019, 1920. But the other aspect which I mentioned earlier on is actually there were two elements, weren't there? One is the cohesion, the assimilation of growth, but the other is the more practical implementation of the infrastructure improvements that have been agreed through the major application of 475, as well as the Section 106 contributions from other development. And it's the time that is needed for that infrastructure to actually be built out and integrated in the development.
Okay. Right, I'm tempted to go on to Mr. Perrins. Okay, you've had a chance. Is there anything, many of these points relate to your site as well, which is a smaller site. Are there any, perhaps it's best if you think you make points that you think haven't been covered, and do you think we can do this in the next quarter of an hour, 20 minutes, or would you prefer to break and come back after lunch? Sorry,
we'll do it now if we can. We'll aim to carry on.
Okay, so what points, any of these things, the schools issue, sort of constraints, what about anything particular to your site about, I mean, I understand it's to the south, so there'll be a different landscape impact. I'll have to go. Do you want to deal with that first?
Yes, thank you. Our principal case is that there's further capacity for growth to the south of Billingshurst, which hasn't been duly recognised in the process to date. This is evidenced by numerous planning permissions around our site in the last 12 months or so, which have come forward primarily through the Facilitating Appropriate Development SPED, and they show that there's a clear direction of growth to the south. These planning permissions accept the merits of going to the south as a sustainable location for growth. Our site, the countryside property site, will relate well to these. They essentially extend the urban area around the western edge of our site. So you mentioned earlier on this morning about whether our site's contiguous with the urban area. We feel it is, and it will be as these planning permissions are built out over the next few years. So in terms of the landscape, the area to the south is in area 46, which is assessed as having generally low capacity for development. But area 46 is a huge area. It's about three times the size of Billingshurst itself. And when you look at our site on a site-by-site basis, the landscape issues aren't nearly as acute as perhaps presented by the council. And these landscape issues have all been addressed on the surrounding sites to our site. It's essentially a matter of design. Our site itself is well compartmentalised in the landscape. It will retain existing hedgerows, and no significant changes will be required to the landscape in that respect. In short, the development of this site in landscape terms will not have a negative impact, and if allocated as we are requesting, it will create a logical rounding off of the settlement to the south to help meet housing needs both in the settlement but also on a wider district level, which we've discussed in previous sessions, are acute.
Okay. Should we let the council comment on that, please? Can we take your comment about the principle as read?
Yeah, and just point out that there have been recent planning applications in 2013 in the areas south of the village, as the gentleman says, and these were looked at in detail. And this is getting to a stage where, try not to get into planning application detail, but this particular site would creep very much further towards the south, and we're starting to see that we need a rounding off of these developments. And in fact, application 2379 did have a buffer zone on the edge of it to start sort of rounding off the development.
I'm looking at, just make sure, I've got your Appendix 1 Land at Marringdean Road site promotion document submitted at Reg 19 stage. Is that the right document that I should have?
That's correct. That sets out the merits of the site in detail. If I just refer you to... My question initially is the red line. I'm looking at the red line land. Your proposed allocation area is defined by a red line on page 5. Yep.
And that includes some land that's already got planning permission, adjoining a recent permission that's being built, is it, at the moment?
It has planning permission, but not yet implemented.
It's not, okay,
yeah.
I thought I saw something on site, but anyway.
The land to the north is being constructed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, the bit to the north, not the bit.
Oh, sorry, yeah. That's being constructed, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and then, so there's a blue area in the east, a pink area to the west, and then there's a green area, not in other land ownership.
Yeah.
And that is that a listed building in there or not?
There is a listed building within there, and the developments approved to the west of that site have incorporated measures within the design to preserve the setting of the listed building, which would be replicated on the countryside property site to the east.
And you're not seeking development on the blue land to the south of the red line?
No, the development is contained within the blue parcel on the eastern extent by Marindine Road, which relates well to the planning permission on the orange section on that plan. So we're presenting that as an opportunity to create a logical rounding off of those developments to the south.
Yeah, that's to the east. What about the pink land to the west?
That's a further opportunity area which could come into the allocation. It's within the Shlar as developable and deliverable.
Well, is that qualitatively different? I mean, in terms of your rounding off argument, that sort of rounds off up to the railway line, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's why we included it as an opportunity. So the whole area together would be an opportunity to round off the settlement to the south,
excluding the green area.
Yeah, on the basis that it has a listed building within it, and it wasn't considered necessary to include that for any particular development. But the developments around it have managed to address landscape concerns with buffers. They've addressed the setting of the listed building through appropriate design and layouts, and the promotion document sets out that approach can be achieved on the eastern parcel. So there's no material difference between what we're proposing and what has already been granted planning permission, which is essentially why we consider there's merits in allocating the site now in this process.
Yeah. Okay. Mrs. Charles, a principal, the site's less than 500. Anything on the landscape and the relationship to adjoining
Mrs. Dawes will help
development?
you with that.
As I said, it's creeping further to the south, and unfortunately we do have planning permissions on these sites.
Well, that's why I went back to that. Yeah. I mean, I suppose there's a few metres on the land to the east. Is that your point? I mean,
If you look at page 36, I think it shows the layouts of schemes, and the scheme that wraps around Black Barn has got a piece of landscaping to the south of it where that was starting to round off the development, round off Billingshurst, and this site would step the development Billingshurst further out and start sort of creeping into the countryside, and it is elongating Billingshurst, and it's fitting it in with existing planning permissions and where this site's going. These sites could be considered through neighbourhood planning, and they could come forward in that respect. And as I say, unfortunately, we've already got planning permissions and sites being built out in this area that could be considered on a more detailed basis with these sites, rather than allocating this site because it doesn't form part of our strategy or come from site allocations DPD.
Yeah, I appreciate. That's the main point that same as we heard yesterday and earlier on this morning. Okay. Excuse me. Do you want to come back on that point?
Yes, thank you. Just on the creeping to the south, the plan referred to on page 36, it's only an illustration, but it clearly shows that there's capacity in the site to wrap around the south and be completely in line with the development already approved in the central part of that area. We've included a substantial buffer area to replicate the approach taken on that planning permission, and therefore when you look at it on an overarching strategic level, there's no reason why the site can't incorporate those design principles and achieve a very strong logical rounding off of the settlement. And I note the recommendation to refer it to neighbourhood plan level, but there is no neighbourhood plan for Billingshurst. And therefore, at this stage, the only other opportunity is to wait for the site allocations plan in 2016, of which there's no guarantee it will ever come forward. This site is available now. It's an opportunity to create a very well-designed development to the south. It doesn't have the same level of impact in terms of infrastructure And the previous planning permissions granted elsewhere didn't have any issues raised in that regard. It can make contributions towards upgrades as necessary, and therefore we essentially think it has a good case for its allocation now, rather than having to wait for an as yet undetermined process, either through neighbourhood planning or site allocations in the future.
Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to say here today? I'll allow you. Okay. Do the council want to make any other comments on that? I mean, you've already covered it, I think, but.
So I'd simply say that I think Mrs. Dorr has explained, the efforts that were gone to in the application that was permitted immediately to the north of this site in terms of looking at a southern boundary between Billingshurst and the countryside. And in my view, in order to breach that really is more of a matter for local consideration. The parish council have been very clear that they're going to, where they're awaiting the outcome of your hearings and your deliberations on the plan before they then decide whether to go forward with the neighbourhood plan. They remain open on the idea, and in fact they're going to explore that further, but they don't intend to do that until after the adoption of the district planning framework, which will provide them with the strategic policies and the framework for them to fit their neighbourhood plan within.
Okay, thanks. Just to be quite clear that I've not misunderstood something here. This is what's on page 35 of the promotion document, right? And I'll try and show you, but the permission is this area here. This is built, right? Or is that under construction?
That's under construction.
There's another permission here.
L-shaped, yes.
Yeah, there.
Yep.
This is the listed building area.
That's correct.
And these are the areas that you say are extending it out to the south.
That's right.
Okay. I don't have any more questions. You didn't see that, but I mean, that's the area with permission. That's the farmhouse listed building, and then there's two areas there and there on your page 35.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. I've understood everything, I think. And you've got nothing else, no other comments on that?
Well, the only other comment is that we have started pre-application discussions on this site. We've had a meeting. Response was broadly favourable given the current context of lack of 5-year land supply. The concern we have now is if the plan goes forward as adopted, that opportunity to bring the site forward is essentially cut off, and we go back to the situation where the plan is reliant on 2 strategic allocations as proposed, and therefore no opportunity to boost land supply elsewhere on suitable sites where capacity exists, such as this. So we essentially get put into...
Yes, okay. I mean, that's a point for me to consider in the wider context of the way the council's set out the plan and how they're all going to work together. Okay. I take the point. I don't think you need to respond to that. That's all right. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. You've definitely said all you want to say. I take it, gentlemen.
So just because I'm not coming back, as it were, for the rest of the examination, I presumably you will update us.
We might not ever meet again, Mr.
No, I know. I've heard you might be retiring.
Very. That's reassuring for you, yeah. I'm sure. I wouldn't have a problem with it.
As we're on number 5, I think, now, in terms of VIP. So anyway, I presume you'll update via the programme officer if you wanted to revisit anything on housing on the final session, because sometimes it's a mop-up session. I just wanted to...
And I'd have to do that quickly. I will, obviously, of course, but I don't think at this stage, no. I don't. I never sort of cut off all options, but no, I'm expecting to. We've got tomorrow on. You're not coming to East of Crawley, then that's not your remit.
Kevin Wilcox from Crest Strategic Projects will be giving.
Okay, fine. So they've got east of Crawley tomorrow. Mayfield. Now, I understand that the Mayfield session will be in the morning on Tuesday now. That's been agreed by all parties. And then there are some other sites, sort of other Horsham, I've called them, other Horsham sites in the afternoon. And then I've programmed a very short infrastructure, what I think would be a short infrastructure session on the Wednesday, which would, but I'm not planning to have any major reopening of the housing numbers or anything like that at that stage. No, I won't be in a position to do that. And then I'll go away and consider the evidence. Okay? All right. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock.